Hello guys and welcome back to my Necromancer class, super original author AEOR 182, and now, enjoy, chapter 76. Maybe just start with who the trap was for, Jay suggested, but it seemed like the statue wasn't listening, deep in thought. Clearly it had been here for a long time as it seemed to either have trouble remembering or piecing its story together. Thinking about where to start its story, Jay took some time to analyze the statue as it was deep in thought. Sedulous, spear, judge, level 20 right bracket, 300 HP, skills, brittle armor, 40% damage reduction to slashing, stabbing damage, 20% more damage taken from crushing damage, Helvetia's revenge, magic damage immunity, any wielded weapons become cursed, double strike. Does 2 attacks in rapid succession. Each attack is 75% as strong as a normal one. 10-second cooldown. Uncompromising. Immunity to all forms of crowd control. Snares, stuns, slows, taunts, sleep. 5 seconds duration. 1 minute cooldown. Retract. Spear returns to its owner. 7-second cooldown. Triple threat. 2 translucent spears float next to the main weapon, striking targets alongside the main weapon. 10-second duration, 1 minute cooldown. Sweeping lance. Knock targets down, cause stagger, or break composure. 35-second cooldown. Force thrust. Thrust attack with double damage. Knocks targets back or executes if below 20% health. Disrupts channeled abilities. Repel, passive. Knocks away physical ranged attacks. 70% chance. Description. As servant of the Helvetian king, turned to stone, she stands guard, waiting for a chance to exact revenge on those who would harm the king. Sedulous, same as the name on the chest I opened. Jay continued to read her stats. Wow, level 20, so much health. Some similar skills to the other soldiers. But I can't tell what the damage is, because I can't analyze these cursed weapons, man. She has so many skills. It must be due to her class. And being level 20, Jay decided he definitely wouldn't last long in a fight with her, and definitely wouldn't try to start one. Leveling up didn't just make you stronger, but you also gained skills too, not to mention combat experience which couldn't be measured. She simply outclassed him by leaps and bounds. Jay thought his own skills paled in comparison, and realized he needed more. I should put more effort into finishing that Chimera skill. It seems easy enough to level up anyway. I just need to summon a feeble creature using the bones of different creatures. Perhaps tomorrow I'll spend time on it after I get Trendley employed at the shop. Man, this chair is uncomfortable, thought Jay, shifting in the cold stone chair as he waited patiently until finally the statue spoke. Helvetia, a city-state, a place once glowing with life. An independent mega-city. It was almost a country in its own right. We were the jewel of the nations, the envy of many. Our minecraft was getting more advanced every day, beyond the understanding of other nations, still, the other countries left us alone. We rose high and grew powerful, and in our pride we mocked the surrounding countries, and no one could do anything against us. Her voice turned angry as Jay listened. A small cult rose from our own ranks. At first they stole technology and research. Soon, to feed their experiments, they struck out against other nations. Cities and forests turned to withered barren lands, and only we had the knowledge to stop them. The statue's voice turned sad, and it had to pause for a moment before it continued its story. We set our pride aside and went after the cult. This was a problem that only we could stop. I served the king directly as he marched with his army, and for weeks we chased a small group of the cult through different nations. Our supplies dwindled as we followed their wake of destruction, though this was all for nothing. Unknown to us, this was a diversion as a larger group of the cult directly attacked the defenseless Helvetia, and with a single spell the whole city was laid to waste. The spell drained life to strengthen itself, and it didn't end until there was no life left to take. Jay nodded slowly. We returned to a black pit of rubble, already low on supplies. We could not turn to any other nation for help, as they hated us for our loftiness, and for the actions of the cult. We rummaged through the ruins, searching for anything, and soon we found our only option, the soul stones. That very day, we made a pact with each other, a pact for revenge. With the advanced knowledge of our military manacrafters, hexamists, and stone wielders, we used the soul stones as our vessels, cursed ourselves, and turned into the statues you see today. But this isn't living. with a single focus for revenge. We built these lofty pyramids, pretending to guard a treasure that isn't here. It was all to lure the cultists back to us, so that we may exact our revenge, though this was centuries upon centuries ago. Perhaps they have already all died. The trap you fell into was one of the many which were meant for them. There are many fake treasure chests just like it. Jay was a little dumbfounded. So you're telling me there's actually no treasure at all here? Well, thanks for saving me the trip. Our treasure is our knowledge, young one. It's safely locked away. Oh, so if I help you, then will you give me knowledge? What is this knowledge about? The statue looked at the skeletons, then back to Jay. A necromancer. I will give you one of three options: mind, mark, or host. I'm listening. Jay tried to sound casual, but his eyes still glowed with excitement. Mind will allow you to learn the craft of mind molding. This will let you create beings with sentience. Mark will let you place an undetectable, invisible mark on someone, as long as you can see them. After you place the mark, then no matter where they are, you will be able to find them and know exactly where they are. Host will let you mentally enter the mind of a skeleton, controlling it as if it were your own body. Jay had to stop his mouth from opening as he thought to himself in excitement. Wow, mind and host both sound amazing, but if I'm going to get a lot of these undead, then the host skill will be weaker, it would be better to have an army of smart soldiers rather than a single elite amongst a pile of trash. I can't really see much practical use for Mark other than for taking revenge. I guess I could put more thought into these skills anyway. After giving them some thought, Jay turned to the statue with his decision already made up in his mind. So, what do I have to do? We are many, we are old, and our chance for revenge has been lost along with most of our sanity. It is my wish that you put an end to us. Jay received a notification but was too shocked to process it. What? You want me to kill you? The remnants of Helvetia. The statue was silent for a moment as Jay began to speak to himself and look at the weapon on the table. I only just found out about Helvetia, and it wants me to end it. Why, what about all the lost knowledge? What about Helvetia's revenge? Was this all for nothing? The statue seemed to respond positively, seeing that Jay was concerned for it. Young one, the statue leaned forward and spoke with a hint of compassion. Don't follow our path. Our knowledge will not help you as you step into eternity. No, it may simply destroy you. But I understand your plight, and it may be a while before you develop these skills on your own journey. Therefore, I shall give you all three skills, but you must find and kill every statue, collect every soul stone, and bring them back to me. Oh, okay. Jay felt some restraint, but couldn't logically disagree. And after some thought, he couldn't bring himself to let this continue. He couldn't let them suffer and lose their minds. He read the notification he got previously. Hidden quest discovered, soul liberation. Gather soulstones and bring them to Sedulus. Progress. Soulstone 26/500. Large soulstone 0/2. Greater soulstone 0/3. Rewards. 3 skills. Mind, mark, host. Weapon, Sedulus's war spear. So I get your weapon too? Yes. Once the curse is lifted, a final gift. Jay glared at the weapon with a ravenous smile before turning back to Sedulus, his smile disappearing. Will I have to end you too? The statue was silent for a moment, but resolute as it spoke. Yes, and I can't help you on your quest as I am bound to the pyramid. I see. Jay matched her resolute voice with his own, staring into the eyes of the statue. I will liberate Helvetia. He stood up, readying his hammer and shield and looking for the exit. So how do I get out? The majestic, courageous moment passed, replaced by awkwardness as he felt a little silly. A crack of light formed behind Sedulus's throne, a wall came down and a staircase formed. I see, thanks. He walked up the staircase and began his mission to lay waste to every statue in sight. Chapter 77. Jay walked into the light. It was still overcast outside, so he wasn't overwhelmed when returning from the dark depths of the pyramid. Looking around, he found that he exited the backside of the pyramid, still in the crumbled ruins of a once great megacity. 500 soul stones. This quest is going to take some time, thought Jay as he looked around, making sure the exit was safe. I'll read that new chapter of the Immortality book before I forget to. Jay walked closer to the pyramid, leaning against it as he pulled out his book and began to read. That page was much shorter, he thought as he stood up, checking his stats to see his immortality research percentage. Necromancer level 8, Race, human. HP, 82/82. MP, 61/67. Strength, 15. Dexterity, 25. Vitality, 30. Energy, 40/40. X, 3849/6000. Skills. Raise feeble creature level 4. Shell restoration level 1. Shift. Unstable teeth level 2. Undead mastery level 2, passive. Stress response, passive. Running level 2, passive. Dagger proficiency level 1, passive. Asklin, equipment. Poison resist 10%, passive, equipment. Scrimshaw level 2, passive. Class utility, passive. Research. Chimera research 6%. Immortality research 3%. 3%. It's progressing quite slowly, but that's fine, Jay thought as he put away his book. I think it's about time to do some hunting. Jay was still sitting down as he snapped his fingers, the 4 skeletons charged off as a group into the city. The 4 of them could easily overwhelm 2 of the standard soldier statues, and since they were using 2-handed hammers, they could just bring the empty soulstones back in one hand while carrying the hammer in the other. Jay smiled seeing them leave into the ruins, jumping over rocks, debris and boulders effortlessly. Sometimes it's just too simple, he thought. It didn't take long before some experience points rolled in. 35 exp, 35 exp. The skeletons all came back, dropping 2 soulstones at Jay's feet before sprinting off into the ruins again. Nice. I guess I can take a short nap. Jay leant his head back against the pyramid and closed his eyes. It was overcast, but it wasn't cold, so he could sleep comfortably. Clink. 930 exp. Jay woke up from his light sleep as a small pile of soulstones shifted. 2 more were added, causing a clicking sound as they toppled down the pile. With a yawn, he rubbed his eyes as he stood up. Whoa, you guys are the real MVP. Damn, looking at a small pile of soulstones, Jay was amazed by their efficiency. Or maybe I was just asleep for a while. Surely it wasn't that long. Jay pocketed the soulstones. 26 empty soulstones. So they got 26 while I was sleeping, but I've been here for hours and got 26 myself. That's a little ridiculous. They literally doubled my stones while I slept. Undead truly are the best workers. Jay shook his head, still amazed. The experience alone would have been enough for me, he chuckled. Jay wanted to stay in the dungeon with his skeletons, but had to make a decision. I'll have to leave the dungeon soon. I don't want to miss Trendley again. I suppose I could just leave the skeletons here to gather crystals and level me up while I sleep tonight. He shrugged with a devilish smile. Anya will lose her shit when she sees that I'm level 9. Compared to having the skeletons hunt in the forest, they give so much more exp slaying higher level monsters in dungeons. So this is much better than having them kill things in the forest. Jay decided to heal his skeletons before leaving the dungeon, draining his mana slightly, but it was nothing that he couldn't get back with a good night's sleep. A pillar sprung up from the street as Jay willed to leave, a door embedded in the pillar. Touching the handle, he opened it into the real world and stepped out cautiously. Looking around with his shield raised in suspicion, Jay was glad that the weird demon tree was gone. They probably all went home. There weren't any adventurers around either, and it had gotten dark. With an exhale, he lowered his shield and took out his luminous orb, charging it before he began walking back to Losler, heading south on the trail before heading west around the mountain in order to cross the north bridge of the town, the route most adventurers took. The path was well trodden as this dungeon was instanced, which gives greater rewards upon completion, of course. At this point, many of the adventurers here would be way too weak. The average adventurer level in Losler was gradually creeping up to 5, and they were still babies, compared to what would await them in future campaigns. Approaching the lights of the town, Jay noticed a few people still outside, wandering between the houses. I guess it's not too late, but I'm pretty tired, so I might as well go to bed, thought Jay as he made his way home and went to sleep. Shring. A single strike created a red slit across a soap rat's neck. Its body suddenly stopped moving before its head slowly slid off. Another soap rat saw this and paused in fear, but this was more than enough time for Methes to dash across to it. Shring. A single slice from his skinny sword was all that was needed to create a slit right down the middle of the soap rat's head. Its head dropped to the ground and split in half. With the gaze of a ravenous hunter, Matheson had an emotionless expression. Perhaps I should find a more challenging dungeon. When he first started coming here, he proudly smirked with a wide smile every time, having a pompous attitude whenever he killed a rat, he celebrated himself as if he had brought down a god-tier boss monster. But as time progressed, his pride slowly began to disappear. These were level 1 rats, and he was nothing, he was slowly beginning to understand something that he was once protected from. Might makes right. His thoughts drifted to the capital. There were many rich nobles and rich families, and many of them were richer than the royal family. But the reason they held power was a simple one. They controlled the military, the adventurers, and the mage hunters. Matheson originally thought he was superior to the common man, as he chased after wealth, thinking it was a measure of power. But as he himself got stronger, he was beginning to realize one thing. In the face of pure power, wealth is like a paper shield, an illusion of superiority. As he got stronger, he realized how weak he truly was. I'll try a different dungeon soon, and if no one wants to party with me, I will do it alone. For the last few days and nights, he was training himself non-stop. His physique was changing into a lean, muscular type, his muscles getting more well-defined with each passing day. Normally, it would take someone a year to gain 10 kilograms of muscle mass, but he had done it in the span of a few days. This was the advantage of having a class. You could put points into strength, and would never tire until your stamina was used up. I'll kill Midas a few more times before I head back. Matheson was getting efficient at clearing this dungeon now. He would run up the log at the start. He knew exactly where the rats would spawn and end them in one hit, then proceed directly to Midas's burrow, successfully landing a sneak attack almost every time. Unlike Jay, however, he did not receive any hidden quests, nor any coat. First scraps were the only thing he could loot, but he was still getting a hefty allowance from his father, so it wasn't even worth his time. Phew, he panted. Time to head back. I should have enough stamina to run back in one go. With Midas slain for the 8th time, he decided to head back to his estate, forcing his chefs to wake up and prepare him a lavish feast before he himself would go to sleep. Chapter 78. This is a free auxiliary chapter. This is the book Jay was reading. You can skip it and still understand the story. I just thought it would be fun to add. Thanks, AERO 182. Extract of a conversation between Olmatrek the Masses and Relara the Gatherer. Olmatrek, why do you create the unending maze with no reward? Do you enjoy their suffering? Are you trying to block them? It is not a block on their path, Relara. No. Why then? It doesn't block them, but keeps them going. Their curiosity drives them to purpose, and their purpose drives them to live for in their hearts. They wish to be deceived, so they will chase these empty dreams, vain philosophy and rumors through my maze, until the day they die ever chasing, but never fulfilled. Why? It seems cruel. They would turn to murder those who have, since they have not. What about the ones with purpose? Those who have eternal purpose without your sacred maze. They are complete, their lives built on mountains instead of on the seas. They won't be harmed by the maze dwellers who are preoccupied trying to find what the complete have. Why not make the maze dwellers complete? They are told the truth and they reject it. They have been told countless times, no. To them, the truth is an offense. This chapter is a preview. If you want to see a faster and more up-to-date chapter, please visit for more content. Chapter 79. Human Kingdom of Astrata, City of Redfall, the Royal Castle, A guard in beautiful decorative golden armor rushed around passages in a sprawling castle, carrying with him a golden scroll holder. It was inaccurate to call it a castle, as it was much bigger than that. It was more like 3 castles that had merged into one huge military complex, commonly called the Three Sisters by the peasants who lived around it. This was the home of the royal family, where most of the higher-tier military generals lived, and where the majority of top-secret magic research and manacraft took place. Underneath one of these 3 sister castles was where the mage hunters operated, and this was where the golden scroll holder started its journey, from one of their special prisons. After Alban the Prophet made a grand claim of death, a new king and a necromancer, an official report was made. This report had to be signed by 3 of the higher level personnel before it would even see the eyes of the royalty, and this was the reason for the guard rushing through the castle with the scroll. Finally, after rushing about with the scroll to get 3 signatures, the guard finally made it to the infamous golden doors. The golden doors were as good as an urban legend to commoners, but every royal guard knew that these were real. They were the entrance to the most secure place in the kingdom, protected, not only by physical force, but also by high-level magic. Another guard in a higher tier of decorative armor that made his own look like trash stopped him. He stood before a file of these guards the door. These were part of the elite royal guards. The royal guard held out his hand without saying a word. The elite door guard's armor even had a mana shield that created a lightly glowing bubble, which he had to deactivate as he grabbed the scroll holder. Similar to the royal court being protected physically and magically, the elite royal guards were too. With a nod, he checked the 3 signatures were present, before returning the scroll to its holder and turning around into the golden doors. He slotted a magical key which has wisps of a glowing aura circling it, colors of pinks and yellows flashing around it. The golden doors opened with a crack. He passed the scroll through to an inner guard before sealing the doors again. The prophecy had successfully made it into the royal court. Knock, knock, knock. Jay yawned as he woke up. Who the? Oh right, Trendley was coming over today. Jay needed a moment to get his thoughts together, and then saw that he had a few notifications, but he decided to read them later. Hang on, I'm coming, he called out as he got out of bed, drank some water and made his way downstairs. Damn, he's so energetic. How he thought as he opened the door, seeing Trendley's energetic face. Morning, I told you I'd be quick with hunting, Trendley said proudly. Come in. Jay opened the door after glazing at him once, walking back into the kitchen to make himself some breakfast. Just give me like 10 minutes to wake up. Have a seat at the table. Jay pointed to his dining table as he found some food for breakfast. So, what did you end up hunting? A hobbit boar. You, a hobbit boar. Good enough, I suppose. Let's get started. Jay spent the next half an hour butchering the boar in front of Trendley, showing him where to cut, which tool to use, as well as the best and worst cuts of meat. Since this isn't very nice meat, I think we will just salt it and make some jerky. Trendley nodded along, remembering every movement Jay made with each of the butcher tools. When you buy some better meat, we can make sausages, patties, schnitzels, things like that. Today, I want you to go to the market and buy an ox badger and a glade deer. We'll open the shop tomorrow after we prepare them, Jay said as Trendley nodded along. Also, buy this list of vegetables and herbs too. Jay began to write a simple list before handing it to Trendley. Jay thought to himself as he gave Trendley the list. I'll need to check on the skeletons. He turned to Trendley before leaving. I'll be back in a few hours, so here's a spare key. Jay took out the key from a vase that was on a windowsill and handed it to Trendley. Everything happened so quickly, but still, Trendley managed to pay attention to everything. Right, a deer and a badger. Got it. I'll see you in a few hours. Trendley was to the point. He eyed the butchered hobbit boar, committing it to memory one more time before leaving. Man, he seems like a hard worker. I like that, Jay thought as he transferred the salted boar into a barrel. Well, I better check on the skeletons. Oh, and those notifications too. 2740 exp. Level up. 5 free attribute points. 1 free skill point. What the fuck? I leveled up. A wide smile appeared on Jay's face. It's almost too easy. Now, where should I put my points? I never thought I would have energy problems, but I did yesterday. Jay thought for a moment, but I can recover my energy much more quickly than health. By simply sitting down, and losing energy doesn't put my life at risk. I think for now I'll dump it all into health. With 5 more points into vitality, Jay's health rose up to 93. Damn, that's high. Jay smiled at his high HP stat. To think when I was level 1, I was doing 1 damage with my shitty kitchen knife. I wouldn't stand a chance against my current self, let alone my insane skeletons. He chuckled to himself. Now, my next skill point. Jay looked over his skills. Do I want higher level skeletons or an extra one? Looking at his restoration skill, he didn't even consider it worthy of thought. If a skeleton was injured, he could just raise it back if its health was too low, and it was probably even more mana efficient that way anyway. No, my minions are my strength, I should focus on them. Jay's eyes drifted to his shift skill as he looked at his stats. Perhaps I can save it. I did get a class skill at level 5, so maybe there will be one at level 10, Jay thought as he looked at his ring. Yet he confirmed his decision. I'll just save it and see what happens when I hit level 10. With a nod, Jay left his house and went back to the dungeon where he left his skeletons. Chapter 80. Jay walked through the city, leaving the north side of town and heading for the dungeon. Since it was daylight, the path was much easier to see, and there were even a few other adventurers walking just ahead of him. Jay noticed something off to the side of the path. I thought so. He eyed some familiar plants. He walked off the path, ripping a small plant from the ground and adding it to his inventory. Then tussle root X4. Awesome. I thought I recognized you. He looked around, noticing a few more plants in the area. I might as well pick them while I'm here. He shrugged. Jay briefly scoured the forest, adding the plants to his inventory as he collected more of the mana regen plant. This will be enough to last me quite a while, he thought with a smile, having collected 12 of the plants so far, each giving him multiple roots. Thanks to his adventurous strength, ripping them from the ground was an effortless task. Content with his stockpile, he continued onto the dungeon. A few other adventurers had seen him picking the plants, but ignored it. They only cared about getting stronger and leveling up, why waste time gardening? Clearly none of them had realized the hidden feature of this plant. As Jay approached the courtyard of the destroyed tower, he found that there were roughly 3 groups of adventurers waiting to go into the dungeon. I guess this one is pretty popular. I wonder why people don't do some of the other non-instance dungeons though. It would let more people party up at once. They could even form 2 parties and work in tandem. Non-instance dungeons were simply dungeons where the monsters would all respawn after a certain time. If 2 different groups of adventurers entered the dungeon at the same time, they would end up in the same dungeon, rather than having their own version of the dungeon to fight through. Jay leisurely walked through the crumbled gateway. Hey, it's him, a girl called out, tugging the arm of another adventurer. Yo, quick, recruit him, another said. We saw him first, someone else called out. A small commotion broke out among the crowd of adventurers as they all noticed Jay. Somehow, word had gotten out that Jay was soloing the dungeon. This was inconceivable to most, seemingly impossible, as it was a level 3 dungeon, and most of the adventurers were only level 4 or 5. Many of them didn't even believe Jay was level 8, until they analyzed him today, and now he was level 9. Surely he was being power leveled by someone, but now there was no doubt about his strength as he came here alone. Normally, adventurers of their level require a party of at least 3 to even have a chance against this dungeon, yet Jay was coming and going into it, like it was the Snacaravan Inn. It was inconceivable. They couldn't believe their eyes. Most doubted this was happening, but here he was again with some brand new boots. Clearly he was making a profit, and since he was alone, he would get all the loot to himself. Jay paused for a moment, seeing all the other adventurers looking at him. Weird, he thought. Most were smiles, but if he looked closely into the crowd, there were even glares filled with animosity towards him. What the Jay raised a brow, continuing to walk slowly through the crowd, wondering what the commotion was about. It didn't take long for him to realize the commotion was about it, the crowd swarmed around him. Jay, would you like to join our party? We'll give you 50% of the loot. Don't listen to him, we'll give you 100%, we just want someone to show us through the dungeon. That's a pretty good deal, right? Fuck, he's level 9. How? Jay was harassed by the recruiters of different parties, but he kept walking. He had a quest to complete, and he wasn't their babysitter either. No thanks. I haven't gotten far anyway. I barely only make it past the gate. Jay held his hands up, hushing the crowd. Jay rejected them politely, and even though he was sounding humble, the jaws of adventurers around him dropped. He made it past the 2 gate guards on his own. How? Just how? I nearly died from one of those damn things. No, I don't believe it, another scoffed. He's probably picking off some weak, isolated guards. Jay continued to walk forward, but a short adventurer with glasses blocked his path. Jay was it. How about you join us? I'll pay, he said with a proud voice. He's not a noble, Jay thought as he looked at his clothes, so I guess I can reject him without repercussions. No, Don't be stupid, said the short man, a party invitation notification appearing before Jay's eyes. I don't invite everyone into my party. You'll be missing out. Besides, if you don't, he leaned closer to whisper so only Jay could hear. I'll tell everyone that you love Anya. Jay stopped walking for a moment, smiling with a head shake. Clearly this pathetic little worm doesn't know me at all. The little worm had a smirk on his face, and his arms folded before Jay replied. Go fuck yourself, Jay said with a laugh and a big toothy grin, making sure he said it loudly enough so everyone could hear, walking away to the dungeon door. The little worm had his mouth open, shocked. Clearly his manipulative strategy sounded better in his head. He was powerless against someone who simply didn't give a shit about what others thought. His face turned red with embarrassment as he merged back into the crowd, though not before Jay analyzed him, remembering his name. Steven, level 5. HP 100%. MP 100%. Yikes, what a shell of a man. He really should grow up. I'll remember his name in case he tries to mess with my life, thought Jay as he finally got to the dungeon door, entering it and disappearing, leaving the crowd with a level of humor as some of them still smirked at Steven. That little bastard, Steven stomped with a scowl. I'll make him pay for this embarrassment. He folded his arms as he looked into the forest. But how? Perhaps a little trap in the forest. Yes, that will be good. I am a sentry trapper after all. He proudly smirked to himself. That little bastard won't know what hit him. Steven marched off with his arms folded. Chapter 81. Jay entered the dungeon again. Oh, I'm back here. He found himself teleported back at the very start of the dungeon. I assumed I would be brought back to where I left the dungeon, next to the pyramid. Oh well, I guess I have some walking to do. Jay squinted around at the cursed land. I wonder if the soldier statues have respawned since I left and came back into the dungeon. As Jay approached the gates to the ruined city once more, he found that the destroyed bodies of the statues were still toppled and strewn about, each of them still piles of rubble. I guess the dungeon only resets when everyone, including summoned creatures, leave. Good to know. This was a good thing. If you were in a party with others and had to leave for a moment before returning, the statues wouldn't suddenly respawn when you came back, catching your team by surprise, and slaying them all mercilessly. 30x. Another statue was slain by his skeletons as he walked. Jay walked past the rubble gateway into the city, heading towards the first pyramid, which he now knew as Sedulus's home. Of course, he would be walking around the side of it, as it was on the other side of this pyramid, where a small mountain of empty soul stones were waiting for him to come and collect them. Even though no statues respawned, Jay remained vigilant as he walked. He had the Deathwalker shield raised, but to his surprise, he didn't encounter anything as he got to the two pillars in front of the Black Pyramid again. I guess there's either no patrols, or my skeletons are quite thorough, he thought, since he didn't see any signs of the powerful stone statues. As Jay walked around the side of the pyramid, he still didn't encounter a single statue, despite not having personally traveled this path before. Nevertheless, he did come across a few broken statues, and it was obvious who, or what, had slain them. 30x. His skeletons were still putting in the work. Jay didn't care very much about not finding any statues to fight, as his mind was on other things. While he walked, a smile was beginning to form on his face, a smile of anticipation. His soul stones were waiting for him. I wonder how many they gathered. And all while I was sleeping. If anyone finds out about my undead companions doing all the hard work, they would kill me out of jealousy. Jay had gained 2740x all while he slept, which was ridiculous numbers, compared to normal adventurers who would have to do 4 or 5 dungeon runs to even get the same amount. It would take a year of hard work for someone to reach level 20. BJ was almost halfway to level 20 in under a month. Normally, your experience points would be divided equally in your party, but since Jay was alone, he was reaping all of the benefits. Not to mention, the skeletons worked tirelessly through the night, showing no signs of fatigue, pain, or exhaustion. Jay finally made it to the back side of the pyramid, and turning the corner, glimmers of light entered his eyes. Oh yes! A wide grin appeared on his face as he ran to a mound of the empty soul stones. Jay almost wanted to jump in and swim around in them, but it would probably be a painful experience, so he decided to restrain himself. There's so many. His eyes gleamed as he looked over the small pile of the dark green crystals. With a smile on his face, he put them straight into his inventory. Soul stone, empty x76. Wow, Jay whistled, 76 of these, that surely brings my quest progress up a bunch. Jay checked his quest. Hidden quest, soul liberation. Gather soul stones and bring them to Sedulous. Progress. Soul Stone 102/500. Large Soul Stone 0/2. Greater Soul Stone 0/3. Rewards. 3 skills. Mind, Mark, Host. Weapon. Sedulous's War Spear. I'm guessing the larger soul stones will be in the other pyramids, probably also filled with all kinds of fake treasure traps. With a shrug, Jay recalled his skeletons. After a moment, the skeletons came sprinting out of the ruins, vaulting over debris and jumping past rocks like it was nothing. If Jay didn't know any better, he would assume that they were hunting him with a passionate vengeance. Of course, these were his minions, and they answered to his call. Jay noticed one of the skeletons was slightly damaged. A rib had cracked, and was jammed into the rest of the rib cage. Come here, he said to the skeleton before eating some bentussel root. Mana regen buff 1%, lasts 1 hour. It will be better to stay ahead of my mana consumption. He chewed the root down before he started fixing the minion. Reaching his hand into the ribsage, he tugged and pulled the jammed bone a few times. Damn, it's wedged pretty tightly. He took out his hammer and jammed it into the cage. At this point, the skeleton was on the ground lying on its back. Rather than a delicate surgeon, Jay was more like a mechanic, jamming his tool into the skeleton's body. Like he was trying to pry open a locked chest with a crowbar. Jay began pushing his hammer and levering it against the jammed rib, grunting as he pushed harder. Ugh, come on you prick. Swearing at the inanimate objects surely helped. Snap. Finally, the bone popped out and he could repair it. He channeled his shell restoration skill, while the bone floated back into its rightful place, reattaching with some of Jay's solidified green gas. Jay didn't stop there. He continued to channel the skill until his mana stopped dropping, this would mean that the skeleton was at full health, and had stopped absorbing the necrotic gas. He repeated this on all his skeletons until they were back to full health. Looking over his skeletons, Jay noticed many little dark green flecks and spots on their bones, the result of his restoration spell. The bones had been patched up with the green mist-like wall plaster, and Jay was surprised at how many tiny bits of damage were on the bones, all of which were now filled in. Generally, the skin and muscles would insulate the bones from the slightest scratches or dents, but since the skeletons had neither, every little bump would cause a scratch or some of the bone to chip off. It was mostly superficial damage, but over time it would build up. Nevertheless, it was repaired anyway. There's also something different. Jay squinted as he noticed something. As Jay looked across his skeletons, he noticed that 2 of them were now the same height as Blue. Lamp and Red, you both leveled up. Jay smiled, raising a brow. Well, of course they did. They had just helped to slay 76 statues. He thought, perhaps I should put my extra skill point into Undead Mastery, so they can reach level 4. He considered, scratching his chin as his eyes drifted across his skeletons. Looking at Sweeper, you're probably not far off from being level 3 either. He thought before looking back at the others. Why do you 2 look weaker? Jay looked at Lamp and Red, comparing them to Blue before he realized something. Their bones looked weaker, thinner somehow. They were like the budget version of Blue. Oh right, you need some bones if you're going to get bigger, Jay shifted his ring into the orbital form to feed them some bones, but to his disappointment, it was mostly a floating ring of gas. Hardly any bones were left. Half of a jaw bone and what looked like a kneecap floated by. Damn, I've neglected stocking up on bones for far too long. After reasoning for a moment, Jay made a decision. We're going to leave. It will be better anyway because this dungeon will reset, and you 4 can hunt some freshly respawned statues. He looked on the bright side, thinking about getting another 2000x. Now, should we get some silt wolf bones or some soap rat bones? Jay rolled his tongue in his cheek, thinking for a moment. Oh yeah, your level 3 skill allows you to convert bones, right? Jay analyzed Blue once more, confirming his thought. Perennial creature level 3, Blue, silt wolf bones. Type, undead. Base damage, 4. HP, 45/45. MP, 7/7. Skills. Corundum Bite. Corundum Claws. Bone Eater. Scrimshaw level 1, passive. Undeath, passive. Shade Vision, passive. Description. An abomination, its existence spits in the face of life and death. Flee if possible. Execute with extreme prejudice, burn the bones. There it is. That Bone Eater skill. He analyzed it. Bone Eater. consumes the bones of its adversaries, rebuilding itself. If I remember correctly, the bones it eats get converted into the same bones as its body. Since you're all made from mostly silt wolf bones, eating the weakest soap rat bones will be fine, as you will convert them somehow. Jay wasn't sure of the mechanism, but was glad for it. Analyzing Red and Lamp, Jay found that their HP was still 30/30, while Blue's was 45/45. Interesting, so health correlates to bone mass, I'm guessing. Well, we better get you guys a snack. Jay still had his ring in the orbital form, so he made his skeletons stand in it as he unsummoned them. Immediately their bones became floating parts of the ring, and they dropped their hammers. Jay added their bone hammers back into his inventory. Quite a quick trip this time. Oh well, time to leave. He shrugged. All he did this whole time in the dungeon was mostly walking. A black pillar with a door erected before him, sprouting from the street, the dungeon exit. There's gonna be a slaughter in the marsh today, boys. Meat is back on the menu. He half smiled menacingly. Double checking that he picked up all the crystals and bones, he left. Chapter 82. Hey, he's back. Wow, so soon. I wonder how many Stalus he killed. Quick, ask him to join our group. Hey, we'll pay you more than them if you join us for the dungeon. Jay left the dungeon and found himself in a small crowd. He calmly walked through the crowd of desperate adventurers, ignoring them completely. Many adventurers wondered why he was doing this dungeon solo. Surely he could make much better progress if he was teaming up with others, but little did they know, Jay had his own reasons. I can't party with them anyway, otherwise they will find out about my class. He didn't care too much about being alone, as his class more than made up for it. Still, he was feeling a little disappointed, but to the other adventurers, he actually looked quiet and confident as he walked through the crowd around him. So cool, an adventurer quietly said as Jay walked by, gazing at his Deathwalker sentry shield which was still equipped. It must be a super rare drop, oh fuck. I think it's looking at me. Another adventurer grabbed her friend's arm as she stared at Jay's shield. For some reason, it sent shivers up her spine. Jay totally forgot he had his shield out, so he immediately stored it away. People couldn't analyze the shield unless he gave it to them, and of course, he would never do that. So he was safe, but it would be better to hide the demonic-looking item anyway, lest rumors spread. I should pick up some supplies and check on Trendley. As I passed through town, Jay thought about his next steps as he walked by without even looking at most of the adventurers. His mind may as well have been in another world. As he walked, the crowd gave way to him, forming a large circle around him as if he had a barrier spell. It was like he was an untouchable prince. But he didn't even notice people were treating him like this. As he left the area through the ruined gateway, heading into the forest on the north side of Losler, Matheson found the mining camp in the Siltwolf dungeon. Seems like I'll need to carry this lamp. He held it in his free hand. Using up a hand to carry the lamp was fine for Matheson, as he used a one-handed rapier. His other hand was usually free, though sometimes he would use it to punch, but that was a rare occurrence. Matheson's sword had a ruby gem socketed into it. It emitted faint red glowing wisps of its aura every so often. It glowed slightly, but not enough to provide adequate light for him to see, so the lamp was still necessary. I will need to get a luminous orb from home. He realized he may need this for future dungeons. Matheson just entered the Wolf Quarry dungeon, and after thoroughly inspecting the mining camp, he began to follow the pressed dirt path which ran alongside a deep river. Suddenly, something stirred in the dark waters. Matheson squinted at a pair of golden eyes popping up from the slow-moving underground river to stare at him. Without incident, the massive golden eyes retreated back under the water surface. He waited a moment to make sure it disappeared. Pathetic weakling, he sneered, albeit quietly. Matheson slowly walked down the path, taking care and creeping along very slowly. To his knowledge, this was the safest way to do a dungeon by yourself. Matheson was alone, so he had to be extra cautious. A dungeon like this was meant to be done by a group of at least 3 adventurers after all. Soon he came to a narrow path that entered into the cave wall. Walking into it, he checked behind every single crack and every stalagmite as he went, and soon enough, he found his first enemy. Behind a large boulder, a silt wolf was crouching as it waited for a chance to ambush a passerby. As it noticed Matheson peeking around a rock, the silt wolf pounced with a snap, but Matheson stepped back, easily dodging it. Before fighting, He immediately analyzed it. Silt Wolf, level 5. HP 40/40. Skills. Solidify. The wolf causes its hide to turn as hard as stone. 90% immunity to all attacks, excluding blunt-based damage types. 10-second cooldown. Corundum Claws. Ignores armor. 5 bleed damage /2 seconds. Can stack, 4 times. Corundum Teeth. Ignores armor. 10 crush damage. Chance to cripple for, 10 seconds. Description. Silt wolves consume topsoil, pebbles and small stones which form its body, and help it to grow, along with organic matter that help to form its various semi-organic organs. These wolves are prized for their large, cobalt blue shiny skulls, which often become ornaments in esteemed mansions, while more rarely are made into armor, due to the nature of their semi-organic bones being as light as leather, yet as tough as bronze. I have a few of these skulls at home, so this is where they come from. He read the description before checking its other stats. Level 5 with 40 horsepower, I'm gonna make these little dogs squeal, he said confidently, perhaps out of habit, before some other thoughts followed though. It is a level 5 dungeon after all. If it's too hard, I'll try a lower level dungeon, he shrugged. Much of his god complex had disappeared. I'll just see how the first fight goes. The silt wolf pounced again with a snap, but Matheson sidestepped and slashed with his rapier, leaving a large burning gash on its neck. The wolf immediately used its solidify skill, but it seemed to be useless against the burning effect. Matheson's sword has a ruby gem, so it did bonus fire damage. The wolf whimpered from the attack, retreating for a moment as the fire burnt into the cut. It only took half a moment before it recovered and resumed growling again. Similar attack style to the rats. Now all I have to do is wait as it bleeds out. He smirked to himself. The wolf jumped forward a few more times, snapping with its teeth and slashing with its claws, but Matheson easily dodged each attack, as he had comparatively much higher dexterity. Why isn't it dying? Matheson sidestepped another attack and looked at the slash across the wolf's neck, noticing something odd. The gash is still there, but there's no blood. He was confused for a moment, but this was not an obstacle to him. I guess I will just have to slash you to pieces. He furrowed his brows in anger, annoyed that the wolves would be wasting his time. Matheson took a more aggressive strategy now, waiting for the wolf to pounce, and then counter-attacking with a slash or a poke. Before, he was simply only doing one attack and waiting for it to die. Matheson developed a strategy to fight the rats, slash at the neck and let them bleed to death. Unlike the wolves, however, the rats actually had blood. This was the most effective way to fight, as he could kill them quickly and conserve energy. Slowly but surely, Matheson was becoming a tactical fighter. While the wolf didn't bleed, damage numbers were still appearing with each strike, so he knew he simply needed to keep slashing at them. Auru. After many whimpers from the wolf, it was finally dead. Wow, 200 XP. It was worth it. Compared to the rats, I would have killed about 3 of them by now, totaling 45 XP. Matheson looted the wolf, getting some ferritic plate and a silt wolf skull. I still don't need to loot, as I have enough money. But this seems like a good habit to get into, especially when I start relying on the loot for money. In the meantime, perhaps I'll create a collection of these drops. Matheson continued on his journey into the mine, albeit slowly. It wasn't long before he encountered his second wolf. I think I can handle these 1v1 fights, otherwise I think I will have to leave, he thought as he entered the fight once more, a calm demeanor. Fighting a single wolf was fine, but adding a second wolf would make things 3 times as hard. Matheson held back no strikes and showed no mercy as he struck the wolf. He didn't care much about its whimpers as he repeatedly plunged his sword into its burning cuts to cause more damage. He slashed its tendons so it couldn't pounce and sliced across its eyes. There was absolutely no mercy or charity in his blade. It was kill or be killed, and there was no such thing as compassion when fighting beasts. Previously, when threatened, Matheson would almost instinctively start yelling about how he was a noble, how his father would punish them, but this verbal reflex was now mostly gone from his character. The beasts don't care about nobility, wealth or background, they only kill, and this was the core part of the reality that Matheson found himself in. It was like a wall that he ran into, shattering his reality. Matheson was being changed by these dungeons, as they made those little things seem to not even matter at all, when faced with life and death. Slowly, It was like the dungeon was teaching him, becoming a part of him. Jay walked leisurely through the North Forest of Losler. It was a nice day outside, and the sun was shining, which was quite refreshing after the long, dark winter, so he took his time. In this world, winter was during June/July. Summer was during December/January. He was walking relatively slowly, enjoying the sunlight shafts peeking through the trees, and looking at the various plants, when suddenly, he felt a small pain in his side. Taka. Looking towards a sound, he saw a strange plant shooting tiny wooden barbs at him. -1. You are poisoned. -0.8 damage per second for 5 seconds. What the? There wasn't much pain, and it seemed like his cloak was blocking most of the damage, as well as the poison. The wooden barbs were already consumed by the Midas coat. Suddenly, a small crab-shaped rock opened up, and from underneath 2 tiny cylinders poked out and began shooting Jay with rock spikes. Taka. -2. Ouch. Jay got his shield out and blocked most of the spikes easily. The Deathwalker's sentry immediately squeezed his arm, warning him of nearby enemies, though this much was obvious. The small turrets took some time to set themselves up before firing, which gave Jay ample time to prepare. Flut. Nearby a puddle made a sloshing noise, and a translucent water turret rose from it, firing water bullets towards Jay. Of course, these two were easily blocked. Jay took a few steps back and took cover behind a nearby tree. Taka. The turrets continued to fire at the tree, even though they didn't have line of sight. Jay was more confused than angry or annoyed about what was happening. With his 93 horsepower, they were like mosquito bites. He easily shrugged off the hits. What the hell is happening? Jay raised a brow, leisurely standing behind the tree. Chapter 83. Since these strange little things were doing small amounts of damage, Jay didn't feel like this was a very dangerous situation, he doesn't need his skeletons, and won't risk exposing his class for something small like this. With a nod, he equipped his Osane arming sword and stepped out from behind the tree, raising his shield to block any incoming damage. Taka. Jay analyzed the turrets. Instinctive stone turret, 5 HP. Skills. Instinctive activation, passive. Can activate without the presence of its creator. Twin launchers, passive. 2 damage. This turret has an extra turret for double damage. Instinctive forest turret, 5 HP. Skills. Instinctive activation, passive. Can activate without the presence of its creator. Natural poison, 1 damage. 1 damage per second for 5 seconds, doesn't stack. Instinctive fluid turret, 5 HP. Skills. Instinctive activation, passive. Can activate without the presence of its creator. Mana form, 1 damage. 1 mana burn. Interesting little things. I'm guessing the stone one is for normal enemies, the forest one for armored enemies, and the fluid one for magic enemies. Jay took his time to read through their stats, as they continued to shoot against his shield. I wonder what would happen if they were made from different plants or rocks. He thought for a moment before shrugging. Oh well. He gripped his sword with a light smile, and went for the rock turret first, it was doing the most damage. Thunk, he stabbed down on it, but to little effect. -1. Good thing I have a hammer. He quickly switched his sword out with his hammer, and gave it a harder smack. -4. The stone turret crumbled and turned into a pile of broken rocks. Next, Jay lightly smiled. This was like a walk in the park for him, and his leisurely walk through the forest wasn't ruined. Jay switched back to his sword before approaching the forest turret. Shring. With a single slash, the turret was sliced in half, the top fell off, and it stopped firing. Next, he seemed bored. The water turret. Jay decided to have a closer look at this one. It was completely made from water, and clearly it was being maintained by mana somehow. Interesting. He gazed closer, taking a few hits from the water bullets. -1. Mana, burn, nullified. Must be my mana membrane skill. Well, I guess I better end you. He turned to the turret, stabbing his sword into it. The water turret deformed for a moment, but quickly reformed and began firing again. Nothing happened. Flop, it continued to fire its little water projectiles at Jay's shield. No damage. I wonder. You're probably made from mana, so I simply need to attack your mana reserve, right? Jay looked at his shield, remembering a skill that it had. Mana burn, physical contact causes manaless to enemies. You're not the only one with mana burn, he smiled. Jay gently brought the shield closer to the turret, and upon contact, the turret deformed. The turret, of course, tried to reform, only to touch his shield again. Stop hitting yourself, he chuckled. This process repeated a few times, and it didn't take too long before the turret turned back into a harmless puddle of water. Jay stood up, looking around at these strange little turrets he'd just killed. Weird. I guess it was probably some adventurer testing their skills and forgetting to deconstruct them. He almost said to summon, but realized that wasn't exactly accurate. Jay put his sword in back his inventory, and used shell restoration on his shield as he continued to walk through the forest, before he put it away again. Continuing along the path, it curved around a thick patch of trees and bushes, this was when Jay heard a now familiar noise. The sound of the turrets activating. Jay ducked behind a tree just as the turrets began firing. Taka taka taka. Taka taka taka. 2 stone turrets, 1 fluid turret and 1 forest turret, began to assault Jay, that was when he heard someone snickering at him from atop a large rock. This is what you get, a short man with a proud sneering smile, and his hands on his hips spat. He was looking down on Jay, as if he was a pig rolling around in mud. It was Steven, who Jay publicly insulted before entering the dungeon. Clearly, he was bitter about it, and Jay expected as much. I was wondering if that guy was going to try something. So these turrets must be his, Jay thought as he brandished his sword and shield. Guess I'll have to put him in his place. He pursed his lips and gripped his sword. Jay jumped out from behind the tree, immediately running at the forest turret. Taka taka taka. A few barbs landed on Jay's shield as he was running directly towards the forest turret, of course. It would be hard to miss a target running in a straight line towards you. With a single slash, Jay sliced it in half, while maintaining his speed as he continued past it. For the other turrets, Jay's movement was too quick, so only a few bullets hit his shield, let alone Jay. Jay quickly stepped behind another tree before choosing his next target. Switching to his hammer, he jumped from behind his tree to another tree, slowly, getting closer to the twin turret rocks. Each of them were placed in front of the large boulder that Steven was standing on. Jay dashed at them with his hammer raised high. Taka 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 taka. Jay blocked every stone spike with his shield and destroyed the first turret with a single hit. -2. He took a few hits, but it was nothing compared to his high health. Steven's eyes bulged seeing Jay and his turrets in one hit, he didn't even expect that Jay would have a hammer. He started fidgeting as he considered running. Jay brought his hammer down on the second stone turret, shattering it into rubble before jumping up onto the boulder. What about the water turret? Steven thought Jay would finish the turret off before coming for him, but he was obviously only used to fighting monsters. When fighting monsters in a dungeon, Steven would be ignored, as the monsters would attack whatever was the biggest threat to them, the turrets. Steven had a single dagger he was holding with 2 hands, pointing it at Jay. Jay sneered, pathetic. And from anyone's perspective, Steven did look pathetic. Long gone was the smug look on his face. Jay ignored the liquid turret. It was only doing 1 damage, while its mana burn was being completely negated. What? Not so high and mighty now, huh? Laughed Jay. You only wasted all your time waiting to get embarrassed even further. At least no one is around this time, huh? Jay did a light shield swipe with his shield, causing Steven to fall on his ass as Jay stood over him, looking like an emotionless monster as he calmly spoke. You think you're something, but you're nothing. Wake up to yourself. You're weak, stupid and pathetic. You seriously thought this would work? Just how dumb are you? Chapter 84. Steven said nothing as he shivered, still holding his dagger up, but against all logic, he suddenly found the nerve to talk back. You're probably just strong because you push other people down. You're like a parasite. You're probably just exploiting someone else to get stronger. I bet deep down you're just a scared little boy. Admit it. A smug smile almost began to form on Steven's face. How stupid is this guy? Are we even living in the same reality? Jay wondered. Steven had absolutely no clue about Jay's life. He simply started to judge Jay. and tried to make him look like some sort of evil villain, even though there was no one else around. It was like he was trying to rile up a crowd of people which didn't exist to come and defend him. He tried to kill me because I embarrassed him. Now he's calling me evil. Seriously. This loser probably thinks he's some kind of hero in a story, that everything he does is morally good, and if not, he will do all sorts of explaining to justify the evil acts he does, giving himself a pat on the back at the end of the day. These self-justifying types often commit the most evil. Jay thought as he looked at the pitiful man before him. His brows were furrowed, mixed with anger and pity. He wasn't sure what to feel. Jay was surprised with his own thoughts. They were quite deep for a situation like this. Perhaps the immortal book is giving me these thoughts. Steven was silent, his eyes widened. He looked as if he got caught opening someone else's presents, it was like he was hoping that Jay would buy his story. A wide smile was about to form on his face, as he waited for Jay to fall into his psychological manipulative trap, wondering if he could trick Jay into arguing with him. Right after he attacked Jay, but after Jay's next actions, his eyes started tearing up. Clearly, Jay's thoughts were elsewhere. Stepping forward, Jay grabbed Steven's dagger by the blade. -3. Blood dripped onto Steven's glasses. Jay received some damage, but it was worth sending a message. He ripped it out of Steven's double grip with ease, tossing it away. How will I make him remember this, thought Jay. He knew he had to send a message, or people like this would just get slightly stronger, get overconfident, and then try to hurt people they didn't like, all while giving themselves a false sense of moral high ground and a self-congratulatory pat on the back. The sad thing was, people like Steven truly believed the bullshit coming out of their own mouths, even though they were the ones who made it up. Jay stomped down on Steven's foot, causing him to wince a little. Taking his sword out again, he stabbed it into Steven's leg, between his tibia and his Achilles tendon. Growl! Steven screamed in pain, tears flowing from his face. Truly, he was like a little child who thought the world belonged to him, but seeing his scream powerlessly made Jay smile. Jay shrugged. I don't know why you're screaming. The next part will hurt more. He ripped his sword out sideways, severing the Achilles tendon. Steven had no breath left in his lungs to scream, and after taking one breath he began to cry. After second, the tendon healed back up, draining Steven's health. How will I stop it from healing? Jay wondered. He wanted to permanently slightly cripple Steven by causing permanent damage to his Achilles tendon, resulting in a permanent limp. A permanent reminder which would stop him from developing such hubris. Furthermore, this would stop him from being able to run away if he tried to do the same thing to others in the future. Of course, if he tried attacking Jay again, he can say goodbye to his other tendon too. This was when Jay had an idea for an experiment. I wonder. Jay turned to Steven, pulling his hand back, and then punching. He bashed Steven right in the cheek, causing his head to bounce off the rock. He was knocked out in a single punch. The water turret was still firing, and had taken 15 of Jay's health so far, so it was slowly taking its toll. Jay hopped down from the boulder and destroyed it with his shield, before returning to Steven again. Next, Jay repeated the same process to sever his tendon, yet this time, Jay tried something risky, he put his hand across and wood, and before the tendon could heal, he channeled some of his necrotic essence into the wound. Jay closed his eyes and felt his energy going into the flesh. It was much more complicated as he was used to dealing with bone, but the difference this time is that he wasn't trying to make something useful from it, but to disable it. Soon he honed in and found the snapped ends of the tendon. Okay, here it goes. Jay focused on them and channeled his necrotic gas to solidify around the ends of each tendon, creating a sort of cartilage cap on each end. If this works, they will act like a barrier to stop the tendons from reconnecting. He smiled, watching the wound close up once more. Jay checked Steven's health after the instantaneous surgery. 64%. Good. It's not dropping. I guess I'll just have to wait and see what he's like after he wakes up. Jay decided to walk further down the path until he could barely see Steven lying unconscious on the rock. He didn't want to be around when he woke up. Jay continued to enjoy the warm sun and the gentle forest breeze. Other than the ambush today, it was quite peaceful, and he was still somewhat enjoying his day, but now, Jay was more interested in his instantaneous experiment. Soon, Steven stirred on the rock, lifting his head up before he sat up. He let out a little squeal as he tried to stand up, putting some pressure on his foot. Clearly, Jay's surgery worked. Jay watched as Steven began to gently rub his foot. "It's working," Jay smiled mischievously. After a while, Steven had to get down from the large boulder. "AHH!" he screamed as he put pressure on his busted ankle. After taking a moment to recover, Steven began searching around the boulder. What's he doing now? Jay wondered for a moment before realizing. Oh right, he's looking for his dagger. Jay smiled, stopping himself from laughing, he didn't want Steven to know he was watching from a distance. After this pathetic display, Jay had seen enough. His experiment was a success. And he was still in a good mood, perhaps even a better mood after learning this trick. I'm not sure if his intention was to kill me, but not killing him was a wise choice, I won't have a dead body or an investigation to worry about. Besides, I don't want to kill anyone. He furrowed his brow. If I have the choice, I will choose not to. It's not just legally wrong, but it feels wrong, and I bet my conscience wouldn't let me sleep well. Though I'm sure there's people out there who don't murder simply because they fear punishment. I wonder if this makes them evil, even though they have not committed the act. Perhaps laws are only for those who are bad, requiring a threat of punishment to stop them. He was getting quite philosophical as he walked through the calm woods. Jay pondered such things as he walked through the beautiful forest, his thoughts quite contrasting to the environment. He decided to put these thoughts aside for now, and enjoy the rest of his walk. Jay made his way back to Losler, entering over the bridge on the north side of town. It was pretty quiet today, and people seemed at ease as they went about their business. Stopping at his butchery, he found no sign of Trendley. I guess he's still busy at the market. Little did Jay know, it was a little harder to find a carcass in the market, because recently, many of the forest animals were decimated. The scent of blood on the wind had kept away much of the normal wildlife. Oh well. Jay entered his house, stocking up on some supplies, water and food. He went to have a bath, but decided not to as he was heading to the stink rat marsh. He was about to get much filthier. I'll leave a message for Trendley. He wrote a small message and put it on the butchering counter. Trendley, I will be back sometime this afternoon. Feel free to get started butchering one of the carcasses. Or wait for me. Up to you. As he was leaving, he remembered something. Oh yeah. He turned and went to his small kitchen, adding some utensils, plates, and cups to his inventory. But why stop there? He added a chair, a stool, and a blanket too. Jay looked around the room, wondering what other kinds of homely comforts he may want when out adventuring, though not specifically for the marsh, as anything he takes out there would get a bad smell to it. Not finding anything else worth bringing, he left and headed for the Stink Rat Marsh. Chapter 85. Jay entered the Stink Rat Marsh. Once more, he was greeted by the sickly rotting smell. The air felt thick, warm and moist. Jay's face automatically grimaced in response. I forgot how hot and humid it was here. Debuff applied. Stink. You are distracted by a horrendous smell. -5% dexterity. Oh yeah. That debuff, I suppose it still doesn't affect me very much though. He shrugged. Now, first I have to cross that giant log. Let's get this over with. Jay found the same giant log that stretched into the horizon. After walking, he found the other log that had fallen on it. He began crawling on his stomach up the makeshift ladder. He still had vivid, horrible memories of when he tried to walk up it the first time he was here. One on top of the house-sized log, he gazed around. I'll summon the skeletons before I jump down. They can start collecting while I get down. Save myself some time. Jay shifted his necrotic ring, summoning Blue and Sweeper first before summoning Red and Lamp with the remaining bones. This was to make sure Blue had a full skeleton. He then took out the blue bone swords before giving them instructions. Alright boys, here's your Osane swords. He handed them the swords. Normally, Jay would toss them on the ground and not bother, but they were on top of a huge log, and he didn't want to risk one falling into the swamp water on either side. 3 objectives today. Kill the rats, eat the bones if you need to, and bring me the teeth. I want a small pile of teeth laid before me. We can worry about corpse collection later. As opposed to last time he was here, he no longer looked like a homeless man hunting rats for dinner. Rather, he had an air of respect around him. He seemed more like a military commander now, or at the very least, an officer. Jay pointed into the swamp. Go. Instantly, the skeletons jumped off the log, plunging waist deep into the swamp water. before they found some solid ground to walk on and could sprint at full speed. With zero hesitation, they then shot off into the murky land, creating trails in the tall swamp grass as they snapped the reeds from their sheer speed. The mud didn't slow them down one bit. Now, let's see. Jay began to look for a place to jump down somewhere where he could land that wasn't water or mud. Cautiously, he began walking along the giant log. It wasn't long before the experience notifications started, causing Jay to smile. 15x, 15x, 15x. The soap rats were level 1, so the skeletons were all hunting individually. This allowed them to kill a greater number of them at once. Jay finally found a way down. He jumped down, and thankfully the ground was solid. Awesome. This is going much more smoothly than last time. Jay looked around for a moment, wondering what he would do while waiting. I guess I'll read my book over a few times. Maybe I can unlock the next page if I understand it. After he began reading, it wasn't long before Blue returned, dropping a soap rat tooth before Jay then promptly went off to hunt again. Nice work, Blue, thought Jay, pocketing the tooth and going back to his book, though he soon got tired. Jay began to rummage through his inventory, finding something that might occupy his time. I completely forgot about this. I guess saving Anya distracted me. Jay brought out a small green crystal with a glowing core from his inventory. Minor crystal, green, charged. Alchemy ingredient tier 1. Spell channel tier 1. Discharge, 1 charge, 0.5 electrical damage. 5% chance to stun for 2 seconds. I completely forgot about this. I was going to use it in an emergency. But now, 5 damage seems like it won't really help in a dangerous situation. The enemies I'm up against have too much health. Jay checked its other uses. Spell channel or alchemy ingredient. Well, I don't know, alchemy not yet at least. Perhaps I can try something with its spell channeling. But how? 15x. 2 more skeletons returned with soap rat teeth, dropping them before Jay and returning to the hunt. I should be fine wasting some teeth as I try something. Jay held the minor crystal in one hand and a tooth in the other. The tooth began to vibrate and levitate in his hand as it was filled with his necrotic power. After it was sufficiently full, Jay released the spell. Bang! The tooth exploded on a nearby rotting log, causing small bits of the black wood to fly everywhere. 15x, 15x. Jay then put the crystal away, casting another unstable teeth spell on the same log. Comparing the holes made by the spell, they seem to be almost identical. Clearly, it has no effect using it like this. I'll have to try something different. Jay thought for a moment about what else he could do. Well, it says channel. So maybe I hold the crystal in the same hand as the tooth. The crystal was about the thickness of a sausage, and half as long, so he could easily hold it in the same hand. Jay had 1 tooth left, but he wasn't worried as he knew that more were on the way. Putting his plan into practice, he began to channel another spell while holding the crystal in his hand. It feels different. Jay's necrotic energy was flowing around the crystal as if it was trying to avoid it. Nevertheless, the tooth still charged and began to float. Bang! Jay released the spell on the same log. Damn, I guess that wasn't it. The spell created another identical hole. What else can I do? Jay racked his brain, trying to think about what to do. For a moment, he channeled his necrotic energy, attempting to have it enter the crystal, but nothing happened. It was like it was being repelled somehow. Yep, I'm stumped. I guess you can't always win, huh? He pursed his lips. I remember Anya saying you could just hold it to use it as a spell channel or something. But maybe I'm doing it wrong. Perhaps there's a technique. Jay gave up for now, storing the crystal away. After casting the spells and getting nowhere, he decided to slowly walk towards where he remembered Stench Rat Midas was. It was better to fight rather than waiting around doing nothing anyway. I might as well make use of my time, shrugged Jay. Chapter 86. Lamp and Red finally brought back some soap rat teeth. They had taken much longer than the other skeletons, so Jay was slightly annoyed. About time, Jay said, but then saw blood dripping from their skulls, he then realized what they were doing. His face grimaced. As they approached, Jay noticed bits of flesh and gore, covering their jaw bones, tendons, viscera and fur, stuck into their wolf skull's teeth. The skeletons were normally imposing by themselves, but this made them seem almost like undead cannibals, like they mindlessly ate flesh even though they had no stomachs. A truly horrific sight. The skeletons were using their bone eater skill to grow themselves, but Jay completely forgot that they would have to chew through flesh first to get to the bones. I forgot you would have to get the bones yourselves. Normally, Jay's ring would tenderly extract bones from a corpse. I'm glad I wasn't there to see it, at least you. The skeletons dropped 2 more soap rat teeth before him, and quickly resumed hunting, and Jay immediately put them in his inventory. He didn't mind touching them too much, as nothing in the swamp was clean anyway. More experience points rolled in while Jay walked towards the large burrow, and this was when he heard stench rat Midas. Hisss. He heard a deep, threatening hissing noise as he approached and poked his head through the reeds and peered into the clearing. Midas was already fighting one of Jay's skeletons, though it wasn't alone. A smaller soap rat fought alongside Midas, and since it was 2 versus 1, it looked like the skeleton, Sweeper, was almost losing, and could use some help. Oh, one of you is already here. Well, I want some practice. Jay had Sweeper back off from Midas, and focus on fighting the smaller soap rat, while he went up and slashed at Midas, grabbing its attention. He analyzed it. Stench rat Midas, level 5. 34/50 HP. Skills. Slippery, passive. The rat uses swamp slime to its advantage. Crowd control skills have no effect. Piercing bite. 5 pierce damage. Tearing claws. Bleed. 4 flat damage over 4 seconds, can stack 4 times. Toxic aura, passive. The stench of this creature poisons those around it. -1 HP per second. 2 meter radius. Poison immune, passive. Description. Both king and dread of the soap rats, living in the stench swamp, it has become one with it. You only adopted the stench, I was born in it. I guess I won't get a hidden quest this time. Oh, well, he shrugged. Jay jumped forward, slashing at Midas, though the large rat easily dodged and bit Jay. Ah, you rat bastard. -0.8 -5 -0.8. Jay was taking reduced poison damage from Midas's aura, though his coat was blocking some of the damage. He didn't have time to comprehend how strange it was that Midas's soul was apparently in his coat, but also in the rat before him. Were they 2 different rats? Did the soul respawn or get copied? Did his coat only have some of the soul essence in it? He may never know. Well, I have high HP now, so that poison damage is negligible. Jay jumped forward, slashing again. Midas did the exact same thing last time, dodge and bite. -0.8 -5 -0.8. This time, however, Jay took the bite in stride and continued to stab and slash at the rat. -8 -8. Midas slashed back with his own claws. 1 paw missed with the other landed. Bleeding. 4 damage per second for 4 seconds. Hiss! It quickly slashed again, but only scraped harmlessly across Jay's shield. Ugh, damn it. Jay jumped back, gritting his teeth as he waited for his bleed to stop. How the fuck is this level 5 rat doing more damage than me? Jay remembered that his Necromancer gas stopped the poison aura, so he released some around him. Hiss! The fat rat hissed at Jay, attempting to intimidate him. It was easier last time, but I guess that's because I wasn't alone. While Jay was fighting, his skeleton fighting the soap rat nearby had finished its fight. Sweeper had killed the smaller rat and was coming to help, but Jay decided to have it wait on the sidelines, only to step in when he needed it. I'm level 9. I should be able to do this alone, he thought as he gritted his teeth in anger. Stress response activated, plus 5% melee damage. Nice, thought Jay as he stepped forward to slash again, but this time, it was a fake attack where his weight was shifted differently to prepare for the real attack, which would shortly follow. Midas dodged the feint to the same side, and as it went to bite, Jay slashed, landing a deep cut across its cheek. -8.4. That's more like it, he smiled. 0.8. Jay took some more poison damage. He lost concentration and stopped releasing necrotic gas for a moment. Jay received a notification after this slash, but decided to wait till after the fight to read it. The rat seemed to get more furious now and charged. Its survival instinct kicked in and this was its final assault. Jay attempted to dodge, but took a claw swipe, giving him another bleed, but he retaliated with his own damage. -8.5. Midas had 1.2 health left now, and both knew the fight was over. Jay decided to end it quickly, as he was still taking poison damage. He stepped forward in the mud. Ah shit. He slipped, dropping his sword. This was the worst possible moment to slip. Seeing its opponent fall, light twinkled in the fat rat's eyes. This was the rat's only opportunity to live now, and it seized this opportunity like a starving Bertram would seize a baked ham. It pounced on Jay and slashed, hitting him with both claws. Jay tried to reach for his sword, but the rat was too large. Its body weight stopped him from reaching his sword. Damn it, he said through gritted teeth. The rat attempted to bite Jay's shoulder too, but his shield was protecting it, so he took no damage. Jay couldn't do anything, but he knew the rat's health was low, so he began punching the rat. Minus 0.1. Phew, what? So low. Jay saw the tiny damage number, wondering what was happening. Immediately, Jay panicked and got Sweeper to come help him. Immediately, Sweeper pounced with its sword. Sweeper only needed a single attack, and the fight was over in an instant. 100 exp. Oh, Jay pushed the huge fat rat off his body, albeit slowly. He had taken a lot of damage, so next he checked his health. 11.8/93. Fuck, I nearly just died. How am I so weak? I mean, I can take a hit, but seriously, I only did 0.1 damage with that punch. Jay immediately summoned Blue and Lamp to come protect him. His health was low, only a few more hits, and he would be dead after all. I should have used the charged green crystal to end it, but in the heat of the fight, I completely forgot. He picked his sword up and had his shield out, waiting for his undead guards. After Blue and Lamp came, Jay had them join Sweeper and form a triangle perimeter around him. Now that he was mostly safe, he finally had some time to think, analyzing the fight. Now what happened there? I am so weak. Jay checked his stats. There were no debuffs other than the stink one. He looked at his sword next. It still does 8 damage, he thought for a moment. I suppose that all this time, my damage only increased because I made better weapons, and I haven't put any points into dexterity, so I'm probably as slow as I was when I was level 1. Jay had a shattering realization. His strength and dexterity had not changed at all since he was level 1. Am I just as weak as I was when I was level 1? He looked at his hands. It seems like the only difference is that I have more health and better equipment. Shit. I think I may have really fucked this up. What have I done? Jay shook his head. He felt like his heart sunk with hopelessness for a moment. He felt pathetically stupid, like he was comparable to that noble brat who relied on his personal guards and expensive items to make himself strong, and what was the difference? He couldn't find one. Little did Jay know that Matheson's progression was going quickly. He was changing for the better, both mentally and physically. It's not too late to fix this. I'm only level 9 after all. I can start putting points into strength and dexterity. I can fix this. Jay nodded, trying to encourage himself. I should have put more thought into it back then, man. I really didn't know what I was doing back then, taking it all too lightly. Okay, my next points will all go into strength. He nodded to himself. It was his lowest stat. I'll make it even to my 25 dexterity, and then raise them both as high as vitality. After that, I will favor dexterity, as my class started with a higher amount. After Jay realized he's actually incredibly weak, he even felt embarrassed. Damn it, I even thought I was strong for a little while there, so that was a fucking lie. He was self-deceived, but thankfully he had woken up. What happened in the swamp today may very well stay with Jay forever, a permanent part of his memories. Chapter 87. Instead of leaving the dungeon, Jay decided to wait here, while his health came back to a reasonable level. He still needed those teeth after all, while the extra bones would be useful in the future. Of course, with only Red out hunting rats, his gathering operation slowed down. Jay decided to have Red drag back the nearby dead rats too, as he needed the bones for his ring. There were many dead rats nearby, so it didn't take long for Red to bring back some fresh corpses. Previously, the skeletons killed them and only took their teeth. Jay shifted his ring, extracting the bones from Midas, as well as 4 other corpses now surrounding him. When done with the corpses, Jay had Blue form a pile of the boneless corpses nearby. Slowly, the piles of boneless sacks of flesh started to form a large unidentifiable mass of flesh in the small clearing. Since they have no bones, they looked like desiccated pieces of a rotting whale, as they slapped on top of each other. Afterwards, Jay finally had some time to check the notification he had ignored during the desperate battle. Sword proficiency level 1 acquired. Plus 2% damage when using swords. 2.25% chance to parry. Scales with dexterity. Dex, sword proficiency level /20 plus 1. Finally, it took so much longer than my dagger proficiency. I wonder if it's because I was constantly backstabbing with the dagger. After an hour, Jay's health went up by 4.2, bringing it back to 16/93. Health regeneration was increased with vitality, along with how fast his body would heal from wounds. When he previously had much less vitality, it would take much longer for his health points to fix up a wound. Red was the only skeleton collecting teeth in corpses, and had brought back 5 more teeth so far. Jay decided to send Lamp off to hunt, now having only 2 guards, of course. He took an extra precaution of charging an unstable tooth spell. Damn, this sucks, but I suppose it's what I deserve. I'm glad I found out how weak I am this early on. Jay waited a few more hours in the swamp, and soon enough his health was nearly back to being half full. Feeling a little more secure, he sent off Sweeper to collect teeth in corpses, only having Blue to guard him, though he was quite safe, as all the rats in the area had been culled. Jay had a small collection of 52 teeth, so far, though not as many corpses, as he only had the skeletons bring back the nearby ones. Each time a skeleton left, it took longer and longer to return, as they had to travel further to find a rat. The soap rat population was thoroughly decimated. Eventually, Jay considered leaving the swamp and returning, so that the rats would all respawn, but he decided to just wait. I'm nearly ready to head back to Losler anyway. He had been waiting there for hours for his health to regenerate, not to mention the time he spent reading his book and messing around with the spell channeling crystal. Jay had plenty of teeth by now, so he put Red on primarily corpse collection duty. It was quite a strange sight seeing a skeleton drag corpses across a swamp. It was like it was an ant bringing home food for the colony, if the colony was a large hive of bones and flesh. Collecting 5 more corpses, Jay was satisfied as he watched a thick curtain of bones floating around him. He called his skeletons back to him, collecting any teeth they had. 58 teeth and 10 corpses. This will keep me going for a while. Jay smiled to himself. I think it's time to go. He willed his skeletons to return to him. Jay looked at his skeletons and made sure they were all complete, having 45 health. Okay, you all look as bulky as Blue. So unhappy. Clearly the Bone Eater skill is doing its job. And your new bones still have red flakes in them. Good, he smiled at Red. Speaking of different bones, an idea flashed across Jay's mind. Sweeper, come here. Jay unsummoned Sweeper, its bones collapsing to the ground. Jay took out parts of its blue bones, and added some soap rat ones of approximately equal proportions. There was now a mix of the rat bones and the wolf bones before him. Arise, he said. Chimera research 7%. Jay repeated this process until his mana got low. Arise. Chimera research 8%. Arise. Chimera research 9%. Okay, I think that's enough for now, he said, feeling a little lightheaded and checking his mana. MP 24/68. I'll keep some mana in reserve so I can raise another in an emergency. I'm about to unsummon all of them and leave the dungeon after all. Raising a level 3 skeleton would take 13 mana. Jay could raise again, but that would leave him with only 11 mana left. This would be dangerous because if he left the dungeon with only 11 mana and no skeletons, he would have no hidden trump, which of course is the ability to summon a skeleton. Before leaving, Jay used his loot skill on the deflated-looking pile of blubbering corpses. Damn, no soap rat tail, he pursed his lips. Jay checked around the perimeter once more, making sure he was safe before he unsummoned all of the skeletons, adding their blue bones to the ring, and leaving the dungeon. Chapter 88. Jay exited the dungeon, stinking like a sower once more. At least I'm not completely covered in filth this time. Jay headed back to Losler, smiling as he approached from the south side. There's no guards this time. I guess they aren't training today. Jay still didn't know that the guards were there last time, because of a monster report, the monster being Jay covered in grime, after he first left the marsh. Since Matheson had been regularly going to the stink rat marsh, people grew accustomed to the filth-covered humanoids. Still, after looking harder, Jay noticed one guard, but he was sprinting away, and at quite a fast pace. How odd. Jay made his way to the Snacaravan Inn, entering the building. He was greeted by frowns from everyone there. Not again, Devon thought, seeing the filthy Jay walk into his establishment as he was at the bar, serving a drink to another customer. 15 gold for laundry and the ruby bath. He preempted Jay's order, hoping he wouldn't come closer to the bar as he pointed towards the hallway. Jay nodded with a smile, pulling out 15 gold, and placing it on the counter before heading to the room. He remembered where it was so he didn't need Tamara to come show him. Devon poked his head into the kitchen. Tamer dash. I know Dad. I can smell him. NNH. He nodded and went back to the bar. Devon returned to the bar. Shit. Where did my customers go? He pursed his lips, leaving to get his mop and bucket, after Jay left a small trail of grime. Jay put his dirty clothes into a basket in the hallway and closed the door to his room, jumping straight into the ruby bath. He smiled with half-closed eyes and fell asleep. Jay marinated in his own juices for the next 30 minutes until finally he was woken by a knock at the door, his laundry was done. Tamara simply knocked and left the basket of clean clothes outside the door. It was standard practice, but she really didn't want to endure more of the smell he brought with him. Jay sighed, I better go check on Trendley, then I can leave the business in his hands, and focus on getting to level 10. His eyes glowed with anticipation. An idea suddenly flashed through Jay's mind. I wonder if I can drop the skeletons off at the dungeon and get home before Trendley is ready. A cold, calculating smile began appearing on his face. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense, but he would have to leave immediately. Jay quickly grabbed the clothes basket from the hallway, got dressed and left his room before running out of the Snacaravan Inn. Thanks, Devon, he yelled without looking towards the bar area. He grumbled back, putting the mop and bucket away. Jay immediately ran north, crossing the bridge and turning into the forest. He was sprinting through the North Forest towards the Mesquite dungeon. Looks like he made it back. Jay smiled as he ran past the rock that he left Steven on. As he got to the ruins, there were still a few adventurers outside. Each of them had hopeful eyes as Jay dashed into the ruins. Jay ignored them and ran straight past, entering the dungeon. There he goes again, an adventurer said hopelessly, thinking that he was weak as he watched the level 9 adventurer run past with zero hesitation. Getting into the dungeon, he was greeted by the dark shadowy landscape once more. His bone ring floated, and a thick curtain of blue and white bones floated around him. Rise, he said 4 times, raising all his undead companions. Before him stood his 4 skeletons. For once, Jay's energy matched theirs as he was moving fast with a single goal in mind, to get them out onto the killing field. Jay brought out 4 bone hammers, handing one to each of them before giving a single order. I want their soulstones piled up here. He pointed next to him. Before he dismissed them, a thought crossed through Jay's mind. What if I put Blue in charge? Would they behave differently? With a shrug, he decided he might as well try it. Blue's in charge while I'm gone. Each of the skeletons looked at Blue for a moment. Weird. Can Blue even give orders? He wondered. The skeletons knew exactly what Jay wanted. With no hesitation, they rushed off to ruthlessly carry out their task. Jay nodded, seeing that everything was in order before willing to leave the dungeon. A large pillar rose next to Jay with a door in it, the dungeon exit. He quickly entered, finding himself back in the ruined courtyard once more. What the? An adventurer saw him come out right after he went in, but he just went into the dungeon. He said to one of his party members. Perhaps he forgot something. The other shrugged. Sucks to be him. Having to walk all the way back to Losler. Someone else added before taking a drink of water. Jay left the same way he came, running at full speed. He ran all the way back to Losler, and it was around late afternoon at this time. Trendley won't mind, it will be fine, he thought as he ran back home. He did say he would be back after lunch, so he was quite late. However, Jay took his time because when he checked previously, Trendley still wasn't back from the market. 30x. The experience started rolling in, and Jay had a grin on his face as he ran through Losler. Many of the people he passed gave him strange looks. He looked like a lunatic as he sprinted through town with a wide grin. All in all, it only took him about 20 minutes to drop his skeletons off at the dungeon. Well, the trip was worth it, he smiled to himself as he finally got home, looking forward to waking up to a massive experience point notification tomorrow. As Jay entered his house, he found Trendley with a glade deer carcass lying on the counter. He had taken off the hide as well as the hooves and head. "Hey Trendley, nice work. Looks like you're ready." "Oh, yeah, sorry I took a while, but I was looking for a good deal. The price was still a bit higher than expected." Wow, he's the one apologizing for being late. Jay thought to himself, well, fine with me. It's alright mate. Let's get started butchering. Jay smiled. Chapter 89. Okay, we'll start with the back legs first, Jay said, brandishing one of his many butchering knives. He spent the next hour showing Trendley how to butcher, starting with the leg, then moving on to the rump, flank, brisket, ribs, backstrap, foreleg, chuck, and finally the neck. The shanks are good too, but I usually save them for myself. They make a good little snack, and people don't typically buy them. Jay handed Trendley 2 shanks. "Thanks." Trendley smiled, adding them to his inventory. Clearing the table, Jay prepared it for the next carcass. "Make sure you always wipe down the table. People can taste the difference otherwise. Have you got the ox badger?" Trendley nodded, bringing out the large ox badger. The ox badger had the body and head of a badger with the legs and horns of an ox. It was not as big as an ox, about the size of a sheep. This one has a bit more fat compared to the deer, but basically, mostly all the other animals you butcher will be somewhere in between these two. This time you cut, and I'll guide you. Jay handed him the knife and cleaver. "I see. Sure." Trendley nodded, grabbing the tools. Jay guided Trendley through the process, and before they realized, it was butchered. He didn't make many mistakes. Seems like he's a natural, thought Jay. Now we can just put them on display, crumb them, or make them into sausage. But for now, just store it in your inventory. We can get some out when we need it. I'm not sure if the inventory will stop things from spoiling, though. Jay scratched his chin. "Oh, it does. It does." "How do you know?" "I just do. I thought it was common knowledge." Jay shook his head in disbelief. "Wow. Well, I'm glad I know now, I guess." He smiled at Trendley. "We're learning new things every day, huh?" He chuckled, causing Trendley to smile too. Jay proceeded to show Trendley how to make sausages, but couldn't show him how to crumb them, as he had no eggs, though he told him the process. It's a pretty simple one too, so he just trusted him with it. Try to have about 200 sausages and about 80 crumb pieces. That's usually how much people buy, but feel free to make more if you sell out. If you don't sell everything, you can just use it yourself. Sure. Jay showed him the prices as well as the small meat display and a few other business functions. After the process, Trendley was ready to run the shop himself. "I think you're ready," Jay nodded. "Feel comfortable running the shop by yourself tomorrow?" "I'll give it a go." "Well, I need to buy more carcasses for tomorrow. The day after tomorrow. There should be enough here to sell for the next 2 days. Every second day we just open a bit late as we have to buy stuff from the market. Other than that, I think you know everything. Usually I get about 3 carcasses of similar size to the deer, so you may run out, but that's fine. Just close if you run out." Jay shrugged. "Awesome. Well, we will just see how tomorrow goes. I'll see you in the morning." "Great. Just let yourself in tomorrow. I might not be here." Jay shrugged. "Dungeon stuff, you know." "Oh, right, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Maybe." Close quote. Trendley pursed his lips, shrugging. 3rd Monastic Academy, Mirror Reality 34. Norgrim was sitting at his desk, stroking his long black beard as he went through some papers. Periodically, he would glance at a floating plant on his desk, which had a light blue glow to it. Norgrim was the headmaster of the 3rd Monastic Academy, an institute designed to protect those who were deemed too dangerous to remain living. Jay would obviously fall under the banner of being too dangerous, as well as those who had soul, law, dimension, love and micro-type magic. Suddenly, a knock came from his door. "Come in," he said, looking up from his work. "Oh, William, hello. Any news?" "Yes, I found an interesting person, though it appears you will be getting a message about him soon enough. He's not strong at the moment though, and he seems to be quite cautious, but he was given special treatment by the guildmaster at Losler." "I see. Well, let's just see what this message says. You have been keeping your eyes out of restricted areas, I hope." Yes, sir. He nodded with a straight face. Good, anything else? Yes. The royal court also received a prophecy, though I wasn't able to see what it said. I see. Thanks, William. I'll have some people pry into it. With a nod, William left. He had usually reported to Norgrim every few days, his unique class which was a mix of soul and nature. While he didn't fully understand one of his abilities, it still allowed him to see important events that would most likely affect him somehow. I can't wait to meet that guy, he thought as he entered the white stone hallway of the academy. He surely must be someone important. This was called the Third Academy, as the first two had been destroyed by the safety bearers. Thankfully, the constant attacks by the mage hunters caused one of the students to develop their abilities to such an extent that they could create a separate pocket of reality. This was where the school currently operated. There were 6 academies in total, and the 5th and 6th still operated in hidden parts of the real world. Of course, not everyone would want to join the academy, and for those who wished for a quiet life, they were allowed to live in a separate community within the pocket dimension, or simply leave to risk getting caught in the real world. Most people who came joined the academy, however, only leaving to join the community to start a family, or after they got injured, or were simply too old. Norgrim was currently the headmaster of the Third Academy. One had to have a sharp mind to avoid and scheme against the safety bearers, as well as a powerful class to keep the students in line. Thankfully, he fitted both roles. Oddly enough, his class was not considered unique when it was first discovered. He was a mana manipulator. While nearly every adventurer, mage, hexamist or practitioner of manacraft manipulated mana, Norgrim's class allowed him to take it to another level. Mana was like the fuel source for all magic, and before him, magic was helpless. It would be like comparing someone who could cause a splash in the water with their hand to someone who could stop an entire river from flowing with their mind. He could not only snuff out spells without a thought, but he could cause mana burn or even fill someone's mana up. Constantly emptying and refilling some of his enemies' mana pools had caused them to fall into a state of numbness, permanently catatonic. It wasn't long before he was branded as a threat. Seemingly overnight, the mage hunters created a way to deal with him. Thankfully he escaped. His picture was plastered all over the kingdom, but he was soon recruited into the First Academy as a student all those years ago. Over time, he rose to become the headmaster. It was quite a fitting position as no magic worked on him. Norgrim was relaxing in his chair, thinking about what he may have for dinner when suddenly, a distortion in space happened. A small rift of darkness and light opened up, and a messenger orb floated through. While this was a common occurrence, the messenger orb this time was colored black, a top priority, top secret message. The last time he got one of these was when the mage hunters were attacking. His eyes widened as he got up from his desk. Running to the window, he grabbed it immediately before putting it into a golden chalice, which was required to open the message container. He snapped his fingers, and all the mana was sucked out of the room. No magical listening devices would work under such circumstances. His eyes darted across the paper as he began to read. After gripping the paper firmly, he loosened it a little as he read, there was no attack. Finally, he sighed in relief. Impending danger was not coming, but rather an opportunity, or dare he say it, hope. The message was of course the one that Sullivan sent all those days ago. It had already made it past the checkpoint between dimensions where it was put into the black priority orb. A necromancer, a human necromancer. He almost couldn't believe what he was reading. He almost couldn't bring himself to. Necromancers were undead creatures of legends, intelligent beings that only the most powerful adventurers may ever see. Even then, it would only be a glimpse. They were naturally elusive creatures, summoning more undead, so that they may never see the front lines of battle. Their army would march one direction while they would march another. Chasing a necromancer meant charging through an army of ravenous undead, and these would not be slow-moving undead either. When undead are summoned by a necromancer, they would always be fast and aggressive, like a rabid pack of wolves bearing down on a defenseless prey, sprinting much faster than humans could ever hope to. If we could get a powerful necromancer on our side, perhaps we would no longer have to hide. No, why limit ourselves to hiding? We could even carve out a chunk of the world for ourselves. Maybe they would have to hide from us. He gripped his fist tightly, smiling broadly. He now had work to do, recruitment. I'll need to dispatch the acquisition team immediately. Immediately he ran to his desk, getting a communication crystal. Lannister, urgent mission. Retrieval of. He checked the message. Retrieval of 2 uniques. Names are Jay and Anya. Location is Losler Village, in the southwestern part of Estrata. Priority is Jay. I'll send you the details. I'll start the retrieval preparations. Lannister replied. Lannister, this is important, perhaps a key in our future. Take Lara with you. I see, I'll bring her too. Thanks. We won't let you down. Lannister could tell Norgrim was serious. He even had a hint of desperation in his voice. I wonder what Jay will bring to the academy. He thought as he started writing down what he need to do. A list of rituals, ingredients and plans he would be doing over the next few days, the steps needed to head back to the real world, and then bring others back to the mirror reality. The first step was of course information gathering. Chapter 90. Viller paced back and forward in his room. Why is there no change? He wondered, looking at his cube. His cube was slowly turning into a prototype instead of the final version. You sensed mana for 2 consecutive days in the afternoons, but yesterday and today, nothing. No mana detected and no new growth. The black cube didn't respond as it had no answers. What was different? I was asleep one time, and another I was training a student. Other than that, nothing changed. He looked at his black cube with a hint of bitterness on his face, shaking his head. I'll figure it out tomorrow. Hopefully this is only a small setback. He felt defeated. It was nighttime by now, and without a word he went to check his training roster. Jay's training session. We were meant to meet a few days ago, but that's alright. Let's see, last time I taught him how to channel a spell. And he learnt mana membrane too. Good. Viller had previously written the letter N next to Jay's name, and suddenly remembered that Jay was a necromancer. It seemed like a massive thing to forget, but Viller had his cube to worry about. It was all he thought of day and night, believing that if he was successful, even an army of necromancers would bow before him. Oh right, we have to keep the training a secret too. Though I'll train him like any other student, focus on the basics before moving on to more advanced stuff. Next steps are to learn to detect, and then to channel through a medium. With a nod, he made a note in a pocketbook before returning it to his coat. I'll have to send someone to tell him he has a lesson, since I haven't heard anything from him in a while. He shook his head. Usually people are dying to have a lesson with me. He began to smile, still shaking his head. I suppose I was like that when I was young. Viller usually handpicked a few adventurers each year to teach, so he was surprised Jay didn't come. The students he picked were the cream of the crop. If you were one of the chosen being taught by Viller, other adventurers would compete to have you join their party for dungeons, you were that much better. Not to mention that to be picked, you would have to be naturally skilled with a useful class to begin with. Of course, with enough money, people such as Matheson could buy lessons too. There were even some adventurers that were grinding in dungeons for the sole purpose of saving up enough gold to buy these private lessons. Viller also suited the teaching role. Compared to other Manacraft practitioners, Viller had a class which allowed him a greater sense and control of ambient mana, his class being a telekine, which had to do with telekinesis, magic analysis, and telepathy. Having such a keen sense for mana was what made him not just a good teacher, but also a good researcher, which was his previous job in the capital, where he used to work for the mage hunters, now called the safety bearers. I'll send a guard to summon him when I wake up tomorrow. Jay woke up with a smile, seeing some notifications greet him. He didn't have much to do last night, so he went to bed early, allowing him to wake up before the sun came up. He quickly opened his notifications, his eyes filled with expectation. 2870 exp. Awesome. A hung chunk of X, all while I slept. He smiled, checking his stats, while he was still in bed. Necromancer level 9. Race, human. HP, 93/93. MP, 68/68. Strength, 15. Dexterity, 25. Vitality, 35. Energy, 40/40. X, 5419/9000. Skills, 1. Raise feeble creature level 4. Shell restoration level 1. Shift, unique. Unstable teeth level 2. Asklin, equipment. Undead mastery level 2, passive. Stress response, passive. Running level 2, passive. Dagger proficiency level 1, passive. Sword proficiency level 1, passive. Poison resist 10%, passive, equipment. Scrimshaw level 2, passive. Class utility, passive. Research. Chimera research 9%. Immortality research 3%. About halfway he thought, seeing his experience. Soon his eyes drifted over his vitality stat. It was high, but he now felt silly whenever he looked at it. Why have lots of health and still be weak? He basically made himself into a walking training dummy, a punching bag. Strength-wise, he was even weaker than most level 1s, as other classes started with 20 or even 25 points in strength, of course. They would most likely have low energy or really bad energy mana scaling, resulting in a small mana pool as a trade-off. Of course, none of them would have undead companions. Well, I'm sure Sweeper has leveled up. I better go gather the crystals and reset the dungeon. But there's no point in healing the skeletons, as I have to unsummon and resummon them. Jay headed off to the dungeon. It was still early in the morning, so there weren't many people around, which made it easier to sprint through Losler to the dungeon. Jay entered the dungeon area. This time there were no other adventurers around, since it was still so early in the morning. A big smile appeared on his face as soon as he stepped into the dungeon as a large pile of soul stones greeted him. Oh yes. One step closer to completing the quest, he grinned as he added them all to his inventory. Soulstones, empty, X94. Next, he willed his minions to rally to him. As if responding to a call to war, they immediately started sprinting out of the ruins. Their wolf skulls would probably begin to make whistling noises, if they could run any faster. It wasn't long before the 4 skeletons stood before J, but there was something different. 3 of them had lined up, while Blue stood in front of them, as if it was their commanding officer. Instead of being like a loose rabble of 4 unruly teenagers, they were now more like a single military unit. Huh, I guess they act more like soldiers when you give them a commander. Jay thought, remembering that he said Blue was in charge before he left the dungeon last time. Well done, good job, he said, before he grabbed their hammers. Jay didn't know if they would even acknowledge his praise. But at this moment it seemed like Blue's skull raised up a little, as if proud that it had served its master. Jay began the process of resetting the dungeon. He stored the hammers away before desummoning them, returning their bones to his ring. He then left the dungeon, so that the monsters would respawn, before re-entering again and summoning the skeletons. After being summoned, they immediately reformed their formation. Blue in front with the 3 others lined up behind him. Jay raised a brow seeing this. It was as if they weren't all just desummoned at all. They skeletons remembered that Blue was in charge. Cool, I guess he continues with his orders even after he's summoned. This would be handy if Jay had numerous skeletons. He would simply have to resummon them if they died, and they would then leave to carry out their orders. Sweeper looks skinny, oh right. You need some food. Sweeper had leveled up to 3. Jay still had his ring in the orbital form, so he let Sweeper feast. Go on, he said, pointing with a nod towards the bones floating around him in the ring. Sweeper happily obliged, plucking some bones out of the ring, and began chomping them down. Jay didn't need to heal any of his minions, as he just resummoned them. As Sweeper ate, Jay analyzed the hammers before giving them back. Seems like they're in pretty good condition, Jay thought as he analyzed them. Most of them were still holding their shape. It seemed that the skeletons were feeding them mana to maintain them. This couldn't be compared to Jay's shell restoration skill, as to maintain necrotic items all they needed was a mana supply. The skeletons still had the ability to craft rudimentary bone weapons, this was where Jay learnt the skill from in the first place. But they still had no need, as Jay supplied them with much better weapons than they themselves could craft. Jay did spend hours crafting bone daggers, in order to raise his scrimshaw skill up to level 2, eventually making the Deathwalker's sentry. Later in the morning, a guard visited Jay's butchery. He had to knock a few times before Trendley answered. Hello, we're not quite open yet, but how can I help? Trendley thought it may have been a customer who was there before the shop even opened. Trendley was a nice guy too, so he didn't like to keep people waiting either. After all, any reasonable person wouldn't mind bringing in a customer early, and it made the business seem more like a part of the community. Like it had a soul rather than being there simply for profit, of course, profit was necessary. Jay, you've been requested by the Adventurer Association, the guard said. Oh, I'm not Jay, I'll go see if he's home. Give me a moment. Trendley headed upstairs, knocking a few times on Jay's bedroom door. "Hello, Jay." No answer. Trendley knew that Jay wasn't a very heavy sleeper, or he would have been up by now, so he headed back down to tell the guard. "He's not here, sorry, but I'll pass on the message." The guard had walked inside without invitation. The guard didn't actually know why Jay was summoned, he had assumed that Jay was in trouble, or perhaps had stolen something, so he did act quite overbearing. Normally, stepping into someone's house would have been rude and imposing. However, it was also a butchery. People were expected to come into the shop, so Trendley didn't even seem anxious. The guard looked upstairs for a moment before pursing his lips. "Just tell him that he's been summoned, and he should come to the association if he doesn't want to be punished." He spoke with a raised, raspy voice. With a nod, the guard left, closing the door enough to be loud, but not enough to slam it, another petty intimidation tactic. He wasn't even fazed, and if he realized what the guard was doing, he would probably even laugh at the guard and his ridiculous behavior. Trendley had grown up around a few of his father's fellow hunters who were like this. These kinds of people would seemingly find any reason to get angry and yell at someone who they deemed to be below them. Of course, they were quite gutless and wouldn't yell at him with his father around. These kinds of people would usually end up bitter and alone. Trendley knew this after seeing it as he grew up. So when people acted like that, he would think about their future and laugh. Their anger was not his problem to deal with after all, and to Trendley, they were more like small dogs, barking out of fear. Many would yell to dominate others, as it stemmed from a feeling of powerlessness, a lack of control and weakness. Trendley knew that deep down, these were damaged, emotionally unstable children, and so he never took it personally. Of course, he wouldn't willingly spend time with such people. I wonder why Jay was requested at the guild. Trendley wondered before going back to make some sausages, completely unfazed. It was like the guard was never even there at all. Chapter 91. After handing the hammers back to the skeletons, Jay sent them away with one command: resume orders. He raised a brow, wondering if it would work. The skeletons ran off towards the ruined megacity, resuming the hunt once more. So they do remember through death. Interesting. Not long till I hit level 10. I wonder if I will get another class skill. He had hopeful eyes as he watched the wolf skull skeletons running over the hill, the clattering of their bones getting quieter. Jay left the dungeon and headed back to Losler. He passed a small party of 3 adventurers on the way who were heading for the Mesquite dungeon, but he still hadn't encountered Steven again. The party of 3 gave Jay a wide-eyed look as he ran back from that dungeon, not only amazed that they weren't the first ones there, but that someone was already heading back from it. He's been here so long that he's already heading home. Owen shook their head in disbelief. "Do you think he's been there all night?" one asked among their trio. "That's why he's level 9, he just doesn't stop. He probably does this every day. And every night technically." This person was right. Jay's skeletons were fighting almost non-stop. That was all Jay heard as he continued past them, though admittedly, he too was a little surprised seeing other adventurers out this early. The Mesquite dungeon was popular at the moment. It was a level 3 dungeon where you would usually fight 2 stone soldiers at a time. They were easy to find in the dungeon landscape, had obvious attacks, and there was plenty of time to prepare to fight. You could even avoid them if you wished. If you wanted to have more of a challenge, you would simply need to walk further towards the pyramids, where the foes would be higher level, though for the most part, they still had similar combat styles to the lower level soldiers. Their melee weapons would tell you what kind of attacks they would do. The level 3 Mesquite dungeon was much easier, compared to the level 5 Wolf Quarry dungeon, which had a more complicated dungeon path with dead ends, sneak attacks, pitch black darkness and narrow paths. The enemies also started at level 5, not to mention the more varied enemies, such as the Silt Wolf variant that did mana-based attacks, or the Rockleaf Mollusk. All these smaller things added up to make it a much harder dungeon to grind in, especially in groups. Most of the adventurers were still level 5, though a few had hit level 6 by now. Jay's stomach was beginning to make noises. He woke up so early today that he decided to skip breakfast. Returning to the butchery, he was met by Trendley as he entered the shop. "Wow, you got here this early." Yet Trendley nodded. "First day of work." He smiled. Trendley was still making sausages, so Jay decided he would try them for breakfast. He cooked them up with some buntussel root. He did just summon 4 skeletons after all, so he needed some of the mana regen. Trendley periodically watched Jay cooking his sausages, wondering if they would be good or not. Finally, Jay sat down to eat. Millimeters. Jay took the first bite. Immediately he looked at Trendley, who was looking at him. Don't worry, it's good, but there's only one thing, you need to add a little more fat from the ox badger. They should be about 20% fat. Trendley nodded. I see. He went off and adjusted the sausage mix. Seems like the business is in good hands, he thought as he finished his meal. Jay was going to head back to the Mistkeep dungeon, but Trendley stopped him. Hey, a guard came by. He said you have to go to the Adventurer Association. Oh, what was it about? I don't know. He just said you were requested. Trendley shrugged. You didn't ask him why? No. Trendley looked a little uneasy. Am I in trouble? He wondered to himself. All right. I'll go see what it's about. Keep up the good work. Jay tapped the counter with his hand and headed off to the Adventure Association. Matheson squinted at a silt wolf in the cave. Why isn't it looking at me? The light from the lamp was reaching the wolf, but it had no reaction. From behind, it seemed like a normal wolf, though it had no large jagged nodules running up its back. Suddenly its head turned into the light where he could see it, and it caused a shiver to go up Matheson's spine. What the fuck is that thing? It had no eyes or nose, only a mouth that opened into 3 jewels. After squinting at it for a moment, it didn't seem that dangerous to Matheson. If it can't see me, it might even be easier than the other ones. Matheson decided to try to fight it, starting the battle off with a sneak attack. Slowly he crept forward, but then he noticed something, another silt wolf lay in wait in a corner of the room. A normal one, it seemed to be guarding the other eyeless one. Damn, I didn't want to fight 2 at once. He pursed his lips. I'll give it a go anyway. He was trying to push himself harder and take bigger risks. This was the second night he had come here, and he had ventured much deeper into the mine this time, though the dungeon was an underground maze, and he definitely didn't take the same route as last time. Hitting level 6 also gave him a confidence boost, so he decided to fight. I'll start with the normal one first. It seemed less risky. Matheson walked over. The wolf noticed him, but before it could react, Matheson jumped forward, slashing his red-hot sword across its face. The wolf whimpered for a moment before snarling and lashing back. Matheson easily dodged its swipe and retaliated with his own slash. Matheson's sword did 5 damage, with 3 extra fire damage, and 1 burn damage for 2 seconds, totaling 10 damage per hit. The silt wolves only had 40 health, so after the second strike, it was already half dead, though if he attacked too quickly, the burn damage would not stack, only doing 1 damage, meaning he would have to do 5 strikes to kill it. The silt wolves also had the solidify skill, which gave them massive damage resistance. If Matheson was too slow, it would be able to use this ability twice during battle. Theoretically, a silt wolf could last for 7 strikes from Matheson's blade. As Matheson waited to dodge the silt wolf's next attack, he noticed a weird bright light coming from behind him. He wanted to look but knew he would be bitten if he turned away from his opponent, so he jumped back and twisted his head at the same time, glancing at the light. Not far behind him, a blue orb was slowly rhythmically pulsing as it was glowing brighter. He looked back at the wolf he was fighting as it was about to pounce. With a sidestep he dodged its bite attack before slashing at its neck. The wolf howled in pain, and while it was an easy fight, Matheson had a bad feeling about the blue orb behind him. It had grown so bright in intensity now that he didn't even have to turn his head to see the light. Retreat or fight, he thought. In a split second he made a decision, retreat to the entrance of the room. He ran as fast as his feet could carry him, dashing across the room. Thankfully he had high dexterity, so he ran incredibly fast. As Matheson got around the corner, suddenly the light coming from the orb flashed brightly and disappeared. Matheson raised a brow, peeking out from behind the wall. Suddenly, a wave of blue light came flying at him, a sphere of light emanating from the center of the room. Matheson's eyes bulged for a moment. He hurriedly turned and stood with his back to the wall, hiding from whatever this wave of blue thick light that was coming towards him. The wave hit Matheson, but he only realized after he found himself falling to the ground, though with his high dexterity, he managed to catch himself and stand up. Due to the attack, he didn't remember the last half second. All he knew was that he was hiding from an attack, and then he found himself falling over. Clearly, the wall did nothing to block whatever that attack was. Ugh. He put his hand against his head, rubbing it as it throbbed. The pain was immense. He felt dizzy and heard a loud ringing noise. What the hell? He couldn't hear his own voice because the ringing noise was so loud. Looking around, he noticed a silt wolf at the entrance. His vision was a little fuzzy too, but he wearily readied his sword. Unfortunately, the passage was narrow and he couldn't sidestep, while he was feeling too dizzy to simply jump backwards. Before he realized, the wolf pounced forward baring its teeth. "Arggh!" He screamed as the wolf sunk its teeth into his arm. It was painful, but Matheson had built up some tolerance to pain through his insane workouts. Without pause, he began slashing at the wolf. Thankfully, it died after 2 slashes. With his arm free, it healed back up as he lost some health points, though there was still some pain coming from it as the bone was now cracked. It would take a little longer to heal due to that. Health points healed flesh quite quickly, but bone was another matter. Grrr. He clenched his teeth in anger, entering back into the room, however, it was empty. His brow was furrowed, angry as he looked around for his target, though he still found no traces of it. Damn it. Fuck. Kicking the silt wolf corpse, he let out some anger. He wanted revenge. After he felt like his head felt better, he was considerably less angry. The wolves were attacking an intruder, not a noble. He thought after his mind was more clear. Nevertheless, I will not show mercy. He looked at his arm. I'll level up more and come back some other time. It's too risky to stay. Chapter 92. Jay had started getting experience point notifications, but he decided to ignore them until he went to reset the dungeon, otherwise it would be bugging him all day. Of course, if anyone knew that getting experience was annoying him, they would probably slap him in the face and curse at him. After getting the message to head to the Adventurer Association, he crawled up the hill and was finally here. "Hello, dear." Margaret smiled, seeing Jay walk into the lobby of the Adventurer Association. "You're here a bit early today." She chuckled. "Hi. Yeah, I guess. I was told to report here." Jay misunderstood her joke but smiled anyway. Let me see." Margaret checked some notes behind the counter. "You have been summoned for a lesson with Viller today." "Oh right, I forgot about the lessons. Shall I go to his office?" Margaret almost chuckled, seeing a student forget about having a lesson with the infamous Viller. Jay was the first to take these lessons so lightly. "Just take a seat, dear. I'll call him for you." She smiled. Knock knock. "Viller, Jay is here for his lesson." Margaret knocked and peeked into the room, but all she saw was Viller facing away from her, standing as still as a statue. "Viller." She stepped in and tapped him on the shoulder. "Ugh." He was surprised with a hint of anger. "You scared me." He shook his head and looked back at his desk. "Oh, sorry." She smiled. "It's just little old me," she said to Viller, who was still looking at the cube on his desk. Margaret briefly looked at the weird black cube on his desk, before turning back to Viller. "Jay's here for classes." She didn't think much of the small black cube. Viller paused for a moment. "Can he come back later?" Viller asked, looking at her a little anxiously. "Sure, I'll tell him later." "Is everything okay?" Yes, it's fine, better than okay." Viller smiled, realizing he was acting weird. "All right, well, I'll go tell him." Margaret left the room to tell Jay to come back in a few hours. Finally, she's gone, Viller thought as he turned back to the cube. Truly nothing else mattered to him. Now let's see. He began using his mana analysis techniques to analyze the cube. The cube had an internal mana converter with a mana pool. The converter was meant to absorb the ambient mana and convert it into its own usable mana. Viller could easily sense the mana flowing into the mana pool, as well as mana flowing through coming from the mana converter. But the strange thing was that the mana converter wasn't pulling in any of the ambient mana. He furrowed his brows seeing this, dumbfounded. It has to be coming from somewhere. He focused harder, but nothing. Is it absorbing something that isn't mana? But what? Mana converters don't just make mana from nothing. It must be absorbing something. Suddenly, it stopped. The mana conversion shut down. Mana sense lost. Appendage growth 22% complete. Re-initializing mana detection routines. Viller clenched his fist in frustration. So close to a breakthrough. The cube normally was charged by Viller's mana to carry out its routines, mana sensing. However, growth was a different matter because it had to use its own mana, and for some reason it was converting some other non-mana energy into its own mana. Viller began scribbling notes in his book detailing his new discovery, before trying to brainstorm what the cube was absorbing. Whatever it was, he couldn't sense it. Well, since my lesson has been postponed, I might as well try to make it to the second pyramid in the Mist Keep dungeon. Jay thought he had already left the association. I'll check back there after lunch. Jay ran over the hill, past the quarry, and entered the Mist Keep dungeon. There were more adventurers around now that the morning had progressed, but it still didn't matter to Jay. He ignored them all without a second glance towards them. Entering the dungeon, there was already a small pile of crystals waiting for him. Good job, boys, he smiled, pocketing them. Soulstone, empty, X6. With a single thought, he summoned the skeletons. It only took a moment for them to come rushing over. Looks like you guys have been having fun, huh? He asked rhetorically. The skeletons lined up before him once more with Blue in the front. Jay nodded, seeing this. He liked how disciplined they now seemed, not that they required it, since he controlled them all, but they were more structured, as soldiers should be. Jay walked to each of them using his shell restoration skill. It didn't use too much mana because they had only been here for a few hours at most. Alright, let's get moving, Jay said, walking ahead of them towards the city. The skeletons were all level 3 now, so each of them could go, even if they fought one-on-one with a stone soldier, however, there were 4 of them. It was always a 4-on-2 fight, completely unfair for the stone soldiers. Jay noticed Blue walk behind him with the other 3 skeletons walking behind Blue in a line. Nice. He nodded in approval, appreciating their changed behavior. As Jay got to the top of the hill which overlooked the city, he noticed some stone statues running towards them. Huh! He was confused seeing the 2 Helvetian stone statues running directly to him. He wondered for a moment what was going on. This wasn't their usual behavior, he only just got here after all. Suddenly, Blue ran in front of Jay, and the other 3 skeletons lined up in front too. Oh, they must have been in a fight when I summoned them, Jay realized. I like that the skeletons will just drop whatever they're doing and obey, he thought with a happy smile. The 3 lined up skeletons rushed forward, meeting the 2 stone soldiers in battle. Jay decided to watch for now. The skeletons have been killing these non-stop, so maybe they've learnt a thing or two. Jay's guess was proved correct as the fight started. The skeletons still fought the same with their hammers, but they had developed a rudimentary battle tactic. 2 skeletons would fight a single statue, while the solo skeleton would run around the second statue in circles, literally in circles, keeping it distracted. Jay shook his head, almost laughing as he watched. The large soldier was turning in circles slowly, trying to keep up with the insane speed of the single skeleton, while its comrade was slowly chunked to death. It must be so stupid that it works. Perhaps this strategy is because Blue is in charge, he thought, remembering how the skeletons fought as if they were alone previously, but now it seemed like they fought as a team. Blue wasn't in the fight, still standing on the sideline near Jay, protecting its master, though it seemed like it was observing the battle. I wonder, if I wasn't here, would Blue be fighting or still watching the fight from the sidelines? Surely Blue isn't that smart. I don't even have that mind skill yet, Jay wondered before shrugging. Oh well, he kept walking down the hill towards the fight, not worrying about the battle as he trusted in his skeletons. As he walked, the first statue went down. The 2 skeletons then ran over to finish off the last statue, with 3 skeletons hammering at the 1 statue. The Helvetian soldier had sealed its fate. Suffice to say, the second statue was crumbled in an instant. 2 skeletons lined up behind Blue and Jay, and the last one was on crystal gathering duty, it was Sweeper. The minion came running back like a dog fetching a ball, seemingly excited to bring them to its master, holding 2 crystals out to Jay. Jay reached out to accept the crystals. Thanks, sweet dash. The skeleton suddenly dropped them on the ground before him. What the? Jay felt like he got metaphorically slapped in the face. His own skeleton let him bend down like a peasant and pick them up. Nevertheless, he knelt down and picked the crystals up anyway. So this is how it feels, Jay thought, remembering how he typically throws their weapons on the ground for them to pick up. While this seemed like a rude thing to do, The skeletons didn't actually have a bad attitude, really. It was because Jay had previously commanded them to drop them before him, both to make a pile, and back at the marsh when they were covered with blood. He simply didn't want to touch them. They are made from decaying bone and flesh tissue after all. It was not hygienic. Remembering that this was his fault, he wasn't offended, only feeling a little silly. Chapter 93. Jay's destination was the second pyramid. However, he first had to walk past Sedulus's pyramid, along with the two massive pillars which sat in front of the first pyramid. Jay remembered that last time he was here, there were two sword statues, and one spear statue in between these pillars of the pyramid. The spear statue had a black helmet that he was forced to knock off before he could end the fight quickly. For a moment he considered commanding the skeletons, but after seeing what Blue did previously, he decided to let Blue maintain his commander role for now anyway. Walking along, Jay decided to open his exp notification. 240 exp. He closed it with a slight smile. Usually he would say nice to himself, but something else was weighing on his conscience, the last few days had felt repetitive to him. It feels like I'm moving in circles heading back to the marsh, realizing I am weak and have not come very far. Doing this dungeon multiple times, what am I even doing here? He walked a little more slowly, feeling like he was getting nowhere. It feels like a waste of time. He pursed his lips and took a deep breath before exhaling slowly. But I have a reason to keep going. I could live a peaceful, quiet life. He stopped walking. Taking a moment, he looked around the ruined landscape as he went deep into his thoughts. It was quiet and dark, a dead land, barren, every building in ruin, never to be built up again. No, a quiet, peaceful life can only come about when I am all-powerful. This world won't allow peace for the weak. He looked at the ruins around him. It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war after all. Otherwise, I may end up like this city. With a nod, he kept walking. This is not a meaningless walk. He now walked a little faster, having encouraged himself. Suddenly, Jay got a notification. Immortality research 4%. Another page, he thought, looking for somewhere to stop. Ahead, there were two stone statues, so he decided he would read the new page, while the skeletons fought. As he read, the skeletons prepared for battle. Once again, the three skeletons stood in front of Jay, while Blue stood at Jay's side like a personal bodyguard. Jay smiled and shook his head, seeing that the strategy was the same as before. If it works, it works, he shrugged, taking out his book. Jay read it as the fight went on, then read it again, trying to take it in and understand it. Jay felt weird after reading the new page of the immortal book, but he soon felt normal again. While watching the last statue crumble before him, another victim of his skeletons. He continued walking across the dungeon, fighting a few more groups of the statues as they marched towards the pillars. Finally, the small band came to the three stone statues in between the pillars. Two swordsmen and one spearman. Should be an interesting fight, Jay thought as they approached. Finally, the skeletons stepped forward, though this time Blue was with them. "You're gonna help her," Jay said to Blue, who finally entered the fight. Blue didn't look back to its master, being wholly focused on the enemies. The skeletons then ran off, each to their own targets. "I'll step in if I need to," Jay thought. Blue went to help fight the spearman. The spearman statue still had the black helmet on, so Jay wondered if Blue would try to knock it off to do critical hits, or simply attack the rest of the statue's body to slowly kill it. It didn't take long for Jay to get his answer. As the fight progressed, Blue and Red slowly killed the spearman statue, without successfully knocking off the black helmet. I guess their skill level isn't quite there yet. He pursed his lips. It didn't take long before Red and Blue killed the spearman statue. 35 exp. I wonder why the spearman statues give more exp, even though they are the same level. The swordsman statues only give 30 exp each. I guess I can ask Sedulus. I might as well drop off some crystals to her too. Blue and Red each went to fight one of the last two swordsman statues. Destroying them took no time at all. 60 exp. The small party continued on their journey to meet Sedulus. Now all Jay had to do was walk around the side of the huge pyramid, which took some time because of its sheer size, yet this was the smallest pyramid out of all of them. Two more statues hampered their journey, though they were quickly ended, and finally Jay made it to the back. Now, the entrance. Jay walked until he found the gap in the back of the black pyramid wall. It was hard to see at a distance because the whole pyramid was black, and it was a gloomy dungeon. Entering it, he walked down some steps before finding the same room that he left Sedulus in. There the statue sat, silent in the darkness, a whole head higher than any other statues Jay had encountered so far. The war spear was still lying on the large table, as if it was an ornament or an artifact designed to be looked at. Sedulus. The statue didn't move or respond. I have some of the crystals. Jay felt a little awkward because of the silence. After a moment, the statue finally spoke, yet it didn't move. Thank you, little one. Sedulus sounded tired to Jay. A notification appeared before Jay's eyes. Deposit soul stones. Yes/no. Yes, Jay thought as he watched the soul stones disappear from his inventory. Thank you, child. Good progress, the statue encouraged Jay. Jay then checked the progress of his secret quest. Hidden quest, soul liberation. Gather soul stones and bring them to Sedulus. Progress. Soul stone 215/500. Large soul stone 0/2. Greater soul stone 0/3. Rewards. 3 skills. Mind, mark, host. Weapon. Sedulus's war spear. Jay finally had a chance to ask his question. Sedulus, why do the spearmen give me more experience than the swordsman? It was quiet for a moment before Sedulus replied. Clearly, Sedulus was quite old, so answering such questions would take time, though after waiting patiently, she answered. Once men of great might and strength, they weren't all the same level when they were in the flesh, but the vessels they turned into became similar. The spearmen of Helvetia were more skillful than the swordsmen, while they are similar in strength now, they were once unmatched. Worlds apart. Of course, greater quality soul stones resulted in higher levels, more skills and memories could be maintained. The spearmen weren't afforded such stones as there were too few of them. Jay became quite interested in these seemingly useless soul stones. So if you have a perfect soul stone, you can create a perfect statue with a permanent mind. Sedulus understood what Jay was asking, but knew this would only turn out to be a curse. Little one, these things are not for you to know. I will not let our mistakes be repeated. I see. Thanks, anyway. Jay nodded with a solemn smile. I can still just come here and gather them for myself after the quest. Who's gonna stop me? Jay thought, but he stopped himself from making a cunning expression. He wasn't sure if Sedulus could see his facial expressions after all. After looking at the beautiful war spear once more, Jay left, leaving the statue in peace. Hopefully I can get a large soulstone today, but they will be higher level statues to fight. Good thing I have about 60 teeth spells. I'll probably run out of mana first though. Jay had completely forgotten that the statues were magic immune. When using a tooth spell, the damage was mostly superficial, but there was still some. The explosive force of tooth would cause tiny bits of it to fly off at high speeds, due to the propagative stress rupturing part of the spell, which would cause minor physical damage. Still, it was a waste of both a tooth and the 10 mana required for the spell. Jay looked towards the second pyramid. It was much larger, and much more imposing. Its grand size alone somehow resulted in a sense of beauty and majesty. Thankfully, there was a large wide path connecting the pyramids, a highway of sorts. The gigantic pillars that were out the front of the first pyramid were now lining each side of the highway. Jay began his journey to the second pyramid along this black stone road. It was still quite far in the distance, and many stone soldier statues made up military checkpoints along the highway. I wonder what the point of these pillars are, just to look cool maybe, he thought as he walked along. It wasn't long before he approached the first group of statues. 3 of them, are all spearmen. Thankfully, they are all still level 3. I wonder if they can work together. 3 is probably not enough to form a phalanx. Jay remembered the guards when he approached Losler. There was about 5 of them, all with spears. Even then, they did not look very dangerous. As he approached, the 4 skeletons finally jumped into action. Chapter 94. You all know the drill by now. Free chapter, you can skip if you want. Why? Because I enjoy it. This one is about malevolence. ERO 182. Journal extract of Strenholm Lugaticus, the savior and liberator of slaves. 5 years before he fought back against his own king, the tyrant King Velither. I found something in the depths of a dungeon. I had never delved deeper, and never will again. Of course, I was rewarded. At first, I thought this reward was a curse, utter madness, but instead it made me truthful, a bringer of light, knowing now that evil is a part of me. I'm able to stand against any evil, seeing it through any mask or veil, compliment or empty platitude. Down in that hole I found a pit of darkness. I threw a rock in, and heard no noise as I gazed into it, listening. Yes, I gazed into the darkness, and it changed me. It showed me something that became a part of me. No, actually, it revealed a part of me. This was what I saw. We were slaves with no names, having outlived our usefulness and destined to die, all gathered up for the slaughter. I was there, a slave. Something I will never forget as we walked to our death was the look on the faces of the other slaves, defenseless like lambs to the slaughter. Utter fear. All I could do was shiver. Guards with spears prodded us from each side. They had no reason to hate us, yet they did. They only wanted to destroy. Caged in from each side like livestock, we were being fed into the fiery mouth of the beast. How could my fellow human do this to me? How can they kill the innocent as if they are emotionless machines? How can they destroy without reason? They would force us to be quiet, beating us. Though I knew I was about to die, so I may as well speak up. You are a monster, I yelled at a guard. This was when I realized something primal in me opened its eyes. Suddenly, I was in the body of the guard. Somehow I had become a guard and was being yelled at by my former self. I called myself a monster. I thought to myself, utterly confused. Yet I knew it was now true. I looked back at my former self with anger and despised my weakness. Truly, I looked like a hopeless wretch, so naive. I was not naive about others, but about myself. Now, I am the guard. Staring back into those desperate eyes, I looked at them with a stern and emotionless stare. I only had 2 words, as I funneled my former self towards the mouth of the beast. I know. My former body then disappeared, ceasing to exist. It did not enter the mouth of the beast. Many entered the fiery mouth, never daring to speak up. I stopped prodding the slaves with my spear, yet they still entered. I stopped the other guards, yet they still entered. Finally, I stopped the slaves. Their endless march to suffering stopped. The fire from the beast's mouth raged, and was then spat out. Flames washed over the crowd instead. Many perished from the flame, but it was soon held back. The only ones who survived its direct flames were the guards. Fire came from their own mouths and matched the beast, for inside all of them their own monsters had been awakened, no longer powerless against beasts. No more slaves were burned hereafter, yet it was not the slaves who were liberated, but the guards. Chapter 95. The 3 statues slowly marched forward with their spears pointing down, ready to meet the skeletons in battle. To face this spear wall would be an impossible task if Jay was solo, an impenetrable wall of spikes threatening to pierce him as soon as he got too close, however, he was not alone. The 4 skeletons fled out and surrounded the small troop of 3 statues. With each of them pointing different direction, their threat was completely gone. Their defensive formation was completely ruined. Like the last 4 versus 3 fight, each skeleton kept a statue busy, while Blue and Red would bully one of them, while Jay watched patiently. Whoosh! A spear narrowly missed Blue as it dodged to the side. The skeletons were light and dexterous, so shifting their weight to dodge was easily done. Not to mention the attacks of the statues were too obvious. Clunk! Red took the opportunity to dash forward and bash its hammer against its back, stone chipping off at high speeds. Jay was watching silently, but soon he realized the weakness of the spearmen, their range. If you can get close enough to a spearman, they are defenseless. Mentally, he commanded Lamp to dodge the next attack and jump forward, getting past the dangerous tip of the spear. The advantage of the spear was its range, and if you could get past it, you could beat a spearman. Of course, a competent spearman could back up quickly, however, these statues are slow because of their sheer size. The skeletons were much faster than the statues, so Lamp easily got in close and started smashing its hammer against it. However, Jay didn't expect what happened next. The statue seemed to grunt before kicking Lamp, sending the skeleton flying back out of spear range again. Lamp took a little damage even though it did more, but if it were doing this for hours, it would eventually die. Oops, Jay thought, feeling a little bad about getting Lamp punished. He failed to realize that the sheer size of the statues would allow them to simply kick away their opponents. The statue, now unhampered by Lamp, then went over to help its comrade, and it would have gotten in a free hit on one of the skeletons. But the skeletons all quickly backed away from each of their fights. Thankfully, Blue noticed and had the other skeletons back off as they waited for Lamp to recover. Okay, so I'll have to heal Lamp after the fight. It seems like the skeletons have probably found the most efficient way to fight. After all, they have been doing this for days now. Jay gave Lamp over to the command of Blue again, and went back to passively watching. Before long, Lamp got up and preoccupied the statue again, while Red and Blue finished off another. Sweeper was doing well distracting a statue as well, and soon the other skeletons came to help. The fight was over. It only took about 7 minutes, and if Jay hadn't disrupted, it would have been 105 exp. Soulstone, empty x3. Jay gathered the loot and continued along the black highway towards the second pyramid. 11 more of the huge twin pillars remained along the highway, each with their sets of 3 spearmen statues. In between each group of spearmen were another 2 swordsman statues. The skeletons employed the same strategy, easily defeating the statues as they progressed along the highway. Of course, the swordsman statues were easy pickings, since there was only 2 of them. Jay didn't even bother to stop walking towards them. At some points, Jay got bored and helped out a few times, which helped things to go slightly faster. All in all, it was 1 hour and 20 minutes before he reached the front of the pyramid, providing Jay with 1560 exp. Jay stopped before the second pyramid. It was larger and more majestic than the first. Damn, he shook his head as he stood at the entrance, unable to find the words. He peered into the darkness through the pyramid gateway, just as dark as the first one, except for large circles of light, leading to a large simple throne, with a statue sitting on it. This one is a bit more simple. The large circles of light came from holes in the ceiling, and after looking upwards, Jay found there was bright sunlight coming from above, though from the outside of the pyramid, there was no sunlight in the sky or skylights on the pyramid. Jay had a strange feeling when he looked up at the fake sun through the ceiling. It looked far too real. 3 large circles of light were between him and the throne, each of them about 50 meters across, as well as another circle shining on the throne. Between each circle was a group of 3 spearmen statues, waiting in the darkness. I wonder why they aren't waiting in the light, Jay thought. It wasn't dark enough to tell that they were just spearmen, and he was close enough to the first group to see that they were also level 3, it wouldn't be hard to get through them. What's the trap going to be? Jay expected a trap as he now knew the motives behind the creation of these pyramids, since he talked with Sedulous. Every pyramid was designed as a trap to lure in their centuries-old enemies. On the throne sat a large female statue with golden glowing eyes. It had a similar female figure to Sedulous, slender and tall. Above the throne was a kite-shaped glowing stone which looked enticing to Jay. Another fake treasure, I'm guessing, Jay thought as he restrained his greed. Jay wasn't close enough to analyze the large statue, but he couldn't see any weapon, so he could only guess what kind of a threat it may be. Well, no point waiting. Jay pulled out his shield and hammer, and began walking into the light, crossing the circle to start the battle with the statues in the shadows. Suddenly the statue on the throne began moving and was standing up. It was still far away, so Jay wasn't too concerned, but he watched it anyway. Jay squinted suspiciously as he walked slowly towards it. The spearmen soldiers in the darkness didn't move. It seemed like they were waiting for Jay to come to them. Fine. He though, having his skeletons charge forward and encircle them. Suddenly a bright light from the throne. The statue at the throne was holding what appeared to be a long glowing golden stick. However, it only took a moment before Jay realized what it was as it pulled back a golden string, it was a bow. A large golden bow. It was seemingly made from magic, though Jay couldn't sense it at all. Shit, Jay suddenly realized the predicament he was in as the statue continued to draw back its first shot. Immediately, he ran forward to the first 3 statues that stood in the darkness. Each of them prepared for his charge with their spears pointed forward. It seemed like they were trying to stop him from making it to the next circle. Of course, this was in vain, as they soon had to turn to face each of the skeletons, their defensive formation made useless. Seeing that the archer was about to fire, Jay charged as he was going to use the spear statues as a shield. Hopefully the archer statue will hit its own troops in their backs. He glared with one eye on the spearman statue before him, and another eye on the archer much further behind. Chapter 96. The golden bow was finally stretched all the way back. Thrush. The arrow released with a deep boom sound from the bow, creating an echo in the room. A golden arrow of light was released, flying across the room at such a high speed that it almost had no arch. Strangely, it stopped glowing as it passed through the darkness, though it was flying so fast that it seemed to make the arrow flash. Finally, it was about to hit the spearman statue in front of Jay. Let's see how powerful this thing is, Jay thought as this was all happening. The statue was still in the darkness, and the arrow stopped glowing as it was about to hit the statue. The arrow suddenly reappeared with its intense glow right before Jay, making a humming noise as it flowed with energy. Jay instinctively sidestepped and raised his shield. He did manage to move to the side, but it seemed like the arrow was somehow magnetized towards him, changing its course in mid-air. He couldn't even finish the thought as it hit his shield. Dwoosh. -3. Ugh. He gritted his teeth as the force of the hit sent him flying backwards. He almost lost balance as he fell to his knees. Shit. He almost didn't have time to raise his shield. It did 3 damage to Jay. After much of the damage was negated by his shield comma though, the shield was not looking very healthy at this moment. All the green veins that coursed across it were gone, and there were no traces of green Necromancer mana flowing through it anymore. Damn it, it might break after the next attack, Jay thought, seeing the sorry state of his shield. Since the skeletons had circled around, they were now fighting the statues in the darkness from either side. Red and Sweeper were fighting the statue on the left, while Blue and Lamp worked on the right one, leaving the middle one for Jay. Why didn't the arrow hit the statue? He wondered as he was forced to get back into the fight and keep the statue busy. -6. Jay got some hits in with the hammer, but the archer statue was already pulling back another shot. Damn it. -6. Jay got another hit in, but it would be bad to be fighting, while another arrow was coming towards him, so he backed off and prepared. Thrush. Another arrow released. Again, the blazing golden arrow flew across the room, flashing as it went in and out of the shadows. Jay placed himself between a statue and the arrow again, but backed up much further into the light circle. This time, I will see what happens. The arrow was blazing with light as it passed through the circle behind the statue. Then suddenly it entered the shadow and stopped glowing again. Jay was sure it was on a perfect trajectory towards the statue, but nothing happened. It began glowing again as it left the shadow and entered Jay's circle, coming straight towards him. Asklin. Jay activated his boots as he ducked sideways, dashing to the right. This time he was well out of the way of the arrow, so he dodged it. Damn, it's too hard to see in the dark when it enters the shadows. My eyes don't adjust quickly enough. Why does it stop glowing anyway? He raised a brow. It didn't make too much sense to Jay, realizing it should have also hit the statues. It should have hit the soldiers though. Is it simply disappearing, or completely becoming intangible? There was no more time for thinking. Already the statue was pulling the golden bow back again, priming another attack. Jay connected the dots after the first 2 attacks, and dashed out of the light circle into the shadows on the right. The middle spearman statue went to fight Blue and Lamp, because Jay disengaged. Now there was a 2 versus 2, a 2 versus 1, along with the archer statue firing at Jay. The spearman statue Jay had been fighting wasn't the only one to act differently. Jay gazed at the archer statue in the back. It was no longer pulling an arrow back. Suddenly, its golden bow disappeared after bursting into particles of light. The statue stood for a moment, staring at Jay. It somehow seemed like it was annoyed. Nevertheless, it began to move again. The golden bow was gone, now replaced by a sickly dark red one. I think I can guess what will happen next. Jay decided to let the archer statue fire while he waited. Thrush. The dark red arrow crackled with energy as it sped across the room, only reappearing in the shadows now and disappearing in the light. Jay suddenly jumped into the light with a mischievous grin. He seemed like a kid playing a children's game. The statue had already knocked another red arrow, but paused while pulling back on the second arrow of dark red light. Jay was in the light again. The red arrow dispersed, and the statue seemed dissatisfied. Jay thought he saw its shoulders slouch a little, which only made him grin more devilishly. The red bow disappeared next, and out came the golden one once more. Jay smiled seeing this, almost chuckling. He realized that the golden bow would only shoot arrows that would disappear in the darkness, while the red bow would shoot red arrows that would disappear in the light. Seems like I've found your weakness. He cunningly glared at the statue, which was no longer a threat. The archer statue had a massive advantage before Jay figured it out, but now it was like child's play. The archer statue was as good as defeated. It could only wait patiently for its death, though of course it still fired arrows anyway. Now the fight would be easy. All Jay had to do was stand in and out of the light to screw with the archer statue, while his minions killed the spearmen. It was as easy as a walk in the park. 35x. Red and Sweeper had finished off their statue, joining Blue and Lamp in the fight against the two remaining spearmen. The skeletons could easily damage them now that it was 4-on-2, and the statues were destroyed in no time. 35x 35x. Meanwhile, the archer statue was still trying to fire at Jay, albeit unsuccessfully. There were still 2 more light circles to cross before Jay would get to the throne circle, along with 2 more sets of 3 spearmen statues. Only 6 statues stood before him and the archer. Jay stepped into the light and back into the shadow again, stopping the archer statue from successfully firing as he looked across the room. Damn it, I will have to cross another light circle. If I run, it will probably only be able to shoot 1 arrow. He made sure his boots had enough time to cool down before attempting the dash across the field. The boots would allow him to dodge at least 1 arrow, though they had a cooldown period before Jay could activate them again. Well, no point in wasting time. Jay shrugged. He was confident he could reach the darkness on the other side of the circle without getting hit. He would have just walked around, stepping in and out of the light to mess with the archer's rhythm, but he noticed there were walls on each side of the circles after the first one. He simply had no choice but to walk across the large light area. Jay waited in the shadows for the archer to draw another red arrow. Just as it was about to fire, he dashed across the circle in a mad sprint. Seeing him enter the circle, the archer had its chance, and it knew it. It wouldn't let such an opportunity go. It quickly dispersed the red bow and reformed the golden one, drawing back an arrow of an intense gold light. It was clear that it put more energy into this arrow. It wanted to make it really count. Thruosh. The huge arrow was released. The noise alone created a small shockwave that caused dust to fly into the air around the archer statue. Its eyes gleamed with ferocity as it watched the massive arrow leave, heading straight towards Jay. Surely this would end Jay in 1 hit. Of course, Jay immediately dropped to the side. Asklin. Boots propelled him far to the right, and the powerful arrow couldn't change its trajectory enough to stay locked onto him, though. It did swerve slightly. The arrows were already the size of ballista spears, but this arrow was more like a tree trunk. As it passed, it caused a primal fear, a sense of death to creep up Jay's spine. SSSS. Jay was about a meter away from the arrow, but the intensity of the power behind it caused his shield and coat to make a sizzling noise. Any moisture on them instantly evaporated. Jay gulped seeing this, his eyes bulging a little. Isn't this a little too strong for a level 3 dungeon? There was one other thing that Jay noticed seeing the arrow travel past. The light coming from the arrow dispelled the darkness. It no longer disappeared when it passed through the shadows. It was simply too powerful, creating its own light. Damn it, things just got complicated. Jay felt like he was out of options, and may have to retreat, though he was still running towards the next patch of shadows, with 3 more spearmen statues waiting. He was over halfway across the light, and his boots were on cooldown. A feeling of uneasiness crept upon his mind as he ran towards the spearmen, his skeletons alongside him. Since the arrow didn't vanish, the whole fight was changed back around. The archer was a massive threat again. If he turned back now, he would probably end up taking a few arrows to the back. He had no choice but to keep running forward, and in the heat of the moment, he didn't let himself hesitate. Chapter 97. Jay noticed the archer statue was creating another arrow, though this was normal-sized one again. I guess for such a powerful spell it must need a cooldown. Jay certainly didn't want to get hit by a tree trunk-sized arrow, so he made a mental note to save his boots for that. Finally, he was now close enough to analyze the archer statue. Treasure guard, level 1, question mark, HP. Skills, Question mark question mark question mark. Description. Question mark question mark question mark. What the hell? I can't see any of its skills. And it's level 1. Jay scoffed. I don't believe that for a second. He pursed his lips, frustrated. Something weird was definitely going on, and while there was an element of danger, Jay now believed he could still win. His skeletons wasted no time in engaging their targets, and Jay wasted no time either as he jumped right into the battle. He pounced on the statues with the cold and diligent focus of a veteran assassin, keeping one eye on the archer as he punished the spearman with his hammer. The middle spearman seemed to be a little more fearsome this time, as it seemed to have better reflexes, and Jay squinted at it in suspicion, analyzing it. It's level 4, he realized before commanding his skeletons. Finish the level 3 ones first, boys. Another arrow hummed towards Jay, but he stepped into the darkness just in time. The arrow dematerialized right before him, threatening to bore right into his chest. Jay unconsciously exhaled seeing it. Jay was fighting with 1 foot in the light and 1 foot in the darkness, allowing him to easily evade the arrows now. The archer statue had no expression as its face was stone, but Jay was sure that it would be grinding its teeth with a vein bursting in its forehead if it could. This only encouraged Jay to hammer faster, dodging spear thrusts and smashing stone helmets. 35 exp 35 exp. With the 2 level 3 spearmen dead, the level final 1 had no hope against 4 skeletons and Jay. It frantically thrusted and did sweeping spear attacks, along with a few different defensive twirls that Jay hadn't seen before, but it was all for nothing. 100 exp. Not only was the archer getting more threatening, but the spearman statues were getting tougher. Jay looked across the light circle to find that 2 of the statues were level 4, while the middle one was much bigger. Its armor thicker and heavier, it was level 10. Damn, what, level 10? That's way too high. Jay furrowed his brows in anger. How am I supposed to get past it? The archer statue was about to release another red arrow. Jay stepped into the light to avoid it, and an idea suddenly popped into his head. Surely it's not that simple. He began to smile. Jay went back into the darkness and waited for the archer statue to release another red arrow. Then he proceeded to dash across the last circle of light. This time, something was different, the level 10 spearman statue had a double-ended spear and stepped out of the darkness to meet Jay in the middle of the light circle. Well, this just keeps getting better, Jay sarcastically said as he shook his head. I'll distract the level 10, you guys work on the level 4s. Jay yelled orders to his skeletons. Jay analyzed the level 10 statue before him. Helvetian soldier, level 10, 200 HP. Skills. Heavy brittle armor, 40% damage reduction to slashing, stabbing damage, 20% more damage taken from crushing damage, 20% less movement speed. Helvetia's revenge. Magic damage immune. Any wielded weapons become cursed. Double strike. Does 2 attacks in rapid succession. Each attack is 75% as strong as a normal one. 10-second cooldown. Full counter, unique. 100% melee damage reflection. Description. Protector of Mern. 100% damage reflection. How the hell am I supposed to kill you? Jay thought, taking a step back to dodge a spear slash. It's faster too, much faster, damn it. Jay realized he had to be extra careful now, but suddenly he heard the familiar sound of danger coming from the archer statue. Thrush. Jay only had one option, to hide behind this large spearman statue, and he hoped this would be the answer. So far, none of the arrows had hit any statues, as they had either missed or were intangible, so he wasn't sure if they could even hit the stone soldiers. This was a risk, but Jay was confident he could still escape if things went south. Boom. The golden arrow exploded on the back of the bulky statue, causing it to stagger for a moment while chips of rocks flung off and whizzed away at high speeds. The level 10 statue was not seemingly defenseless as it kneeled down. This was Jay's opportunity. He smashed down on the head of the statue with his hammer. Critical hit 12. Jay struck again with his hammer, trying to do the most damage possible. The statue was kneeling on one knee and couldn't see Jay, but suddenly its double-ended spear came up above its head and perfectly blocked Jay's attack. The momentum caused the spear to twirl around, and the other end struck back at Jay. -6. Ugh. Jay gritted his teeth. The spear pierced him right in the leg. Jay took a few steps back, almost falling over as his upper leg muscle, the tensor fascia lati, was almost completely severed. It quickly healed up as his health bar dropped by 6, his leg movement restored. Dangerous, thought Jay, squinting at the double-ended spear. The full counter skill was nothing to mess around with. The statue stepped forward again, thrusting its spear. Jay narrowly evaded, but the statue used its double strike. The resulting second pierce of the spear came much too quickly for Jay to dodge. Shy Jay braced himself for the pain and raised his shield. Broom. The force of the hit caused the shield to vibrate, and Jay was sent flying 5 meters backwards. He was turned around and forced to place his hand on the ground to stop himself from falling over. -3. The statue gave him no rest or respite. Clearly it was a seasoned fighter, still retaining its combat sense from its last life, as if it was now a core part of its being. Jay only took 3 damage, but that was after the 80% damage reduction from his shield. It would have done 15 damage otherwise. Bits of bone had chipped off Deathwalker's sentry now, and Jay could tell it may not survive the next hit. The level 10 statue was rushing over to Jay, while he was still recovering from the last spear hit. It was not letting any opportunity escape. Damn it, Jay gritted his teeth, preparing for the next hit, about to get pierced by the double-ended spear once again. A golden arrow came flying, and thankfully, Jay was still behind the level 10 statue. A mischievous grin appeared on Jay's face as he looked up, realizing the statue was about to get struck again, and right before he would be hit, he was about to escape the attack. Boom. The level 10 statue went down to one knee again, pausing in its tracks. It didn't get a hit on Jay. Jay pounced up like a little hungry goblin, seizing the opportunity and smashing his hammer at the level 10 statue again. Critical hit 12. A new crack began to form on the stone soldier's helmet now, but it was nothing compared to the gashes across its back. Jay smirked seeing the damage, and quickly took a step back. He wasn't going to let the statue counter him again. Chapter 98. Just like he thought, the statue stood up and retaliated with a spear thrust. Since Jay preempted its attack, he was already out of range. A mocking smile plastered across his face. Jay took this moment to check its health. 146/200. Nice, this shouldn't take too long. 100 exp 100 exp. The skeletons had finished killing the statues, and were coming over to help Jay. Shit, Jay's eyes bulged for a moment seeing the skeletons dash over. The full counter skill of the statue was no joke. They skeletons would only end up killing themselves if they tried to help. Jay inhaled deeply, mentally ordering the skeletons to fall back into the shadows behind him. He would have had the skeletons attack the archer statue, but he realized he needed the archer to kill the level 10 spearman statue. Without the archer, this fight was lost, the spearman statue would be undefeatable. Jay would probably have to get Anya to help him if the archer died, and he didn't want to get tied down any more than he already was by the guildmaster, of course. It would be hard to be more blackmailed than he already was. Damn it, Jay's hands were tied. He simply had to do this himself without the help of the skeletons. Boom. Another arrow came, smashing into the statue again. Jay smiled. The fight wasn't too hard without the skeletons anyway. Without waiting, Jay jumped forward and smashed the hammer down on the statue's head once more. Critical hit 12. Jumping back after doing his damage, Jay had an idea. It makes no sense that the skeletons can't help me. He had his skeletons stand close by as he waited for the right moment. He dodged more spear swipes, sweeps and thrusts as he waited for the next arrow, and like clockwork, it came buzzing again. Boom. Now, Jay yelled at his minions as he jumped forward and smashed his hammer, yet this time, all his skeletons copied him. The strikes all rained down in perfect unity. Maximum damage. Critical hit 12. Critical hit 12. Critical hit 12. Damage numbers floated above the level 10 statue's head as it lost over 25% of its health all at once. Its thick helmet had cracked in lots of places, and a few chunks of the statue had fallen off and were strewn about. Back, he called to his skeletons. The skeletons ran back behind Jay again as he stepped back too. Jay leapt backwards but found himself in the darkness. After all the backstepping, he realized he finally went too far. This would not be good. The archer started knocking a red arrow, Since Jay was in the shadows now, if it could release the red shadow arrow, it would not hit the statue who was in the light. Jay decided to run to the right and enter the light circle again. The red arrow dispersed, and a golden one was being pulled back, but this time, it was one of the powerful ones. Since Jay was no longer hiding behind any statues, the archer finally found another opportunity to use its most powerful attack. Jay didn't seem to care. He knew what he was doing as he ran further into the circle. His boots were ready again and he had a plan. He made his skeletons wait in the darkness, however. He wasn't going to need them for now. The archer statue saw that Jay was fully exposed now, a sitting duck in the middle of the light circle. It finally had a chance. A golden arrow was pulled back in the bow as it hummed with energy, channeling its most powerful attack. Jay almost smirked seeing this, but he decided to hide it. He didn't want the statue to know that he was planning something. In a short moment, Jay looked back, making sure that the level 10 statue was behind him. Then he heard the familiar sound. Throom. The massive tree trunk-sized projectile was released with the intense heat of a small sun. Finally, Jay let his smile show as the arrow drew nearer. He ducked to the side. Asklin. PSHHHT. The boots propelled him to the side. VRSSSSS. The huge arrow passed by harmlessly with a hum, steaming more of Jay's clothes. This arrow almost seemed bigger than the last. Boom. The ground seemed to shake, and Jay knew what happened before he even looked back. One of your perennial creatures has fallen. The level 10 statue was ended in one hit, turned to unidentifiable chunks of rock and dust in an instant. Even its weapon had shattered, turned to rubble and stones. The arrow continued and even wiped out one of Jay's skeletons. 2300X. Level up. Seeing the level up notification, a big grin appeared on Jay's face. For a moment, he completely forgot that one of his creatures died, but he stopped himself from getting too excited. They were still in the midst of battle after all. Attack. Jay thought as he rushed along with his skeletons over to finish off the archer's statue. As Jay and his skeletons drew closer, they bared down on it like a pack of hungry wolves. In close range, the archer statue was defenseless. Even though they were all in the last light circle, the statue pulled back a red arrow. Huh! Jay raised a brow. That isn't right. He stopped running forward, but let his minions continue to press the attack. It seems like it still had one trick up its sleeve. Just before the skeletons could reach it, the archer statue's right leg armor glowed. Jay squinted seeing this, suspicious. Suddenly the archer stomped forward, and a circular pulse of golden light exploded outwards. Suddenly, all of the skeletons were sent flying off out of the circle. Jay too was sent flying. It was like a wall hit him and pushed him out, a growing shield that pushed away everything. Everyone except the archer was in the shadows now. Suddenly, Jay understood why it was charging a red arrow. His boots were still on cooldown, and so he could only try to run back into the circle, but it was too late. Thrush. Jay had regretful eyes as he raised his Deathwalker's sentry shield to block the hit. The shield would definitely crumble after this. He didn't want to have to reform it, but it was better than taking a hit, and this is what shields were for. Boom. The blast from the red arrow sent Jay flying backwards further into the shadows, and the shield crumbled into 3 pieces. -3. Of course, this was not the end for the shield, as it still had the remnant skill. When life reaches 0, the shield breaks into 3 pieces. Can be restored using necrotic mana. Each piece can track the other pieces. With an angry look, Jay rushed forward. The archer was already preparing its next red arrow, but it would be too slow. Jay stepped into the light, slightly beating his skeletons into it. They were flung further into the darkness. Since they were lighter, of course, they caught up quite quickly due to their sheer speed. 3 skeletons and Jay were now once more bearing down on the archer like wild beasts. Another golden arrow was released toward Jay, but he used his Asklin skill from his boots to dodge it easily, and kept running forward with a renewed vigor. Jay got the first hit in, smashing it right in the head, a fitting punishment. The skeletons followed up Jay's attack with their own hits. Critical hit 12. 666. The archer tried to knock more arrows, but it kept getting disrupted by the endless hits of the minions and Jay. Critical hit 12. 6612. Damn it, how much health does this thing have? Jay wanted to end it before it recovered, and used that stomp shield skill again. He still couldn't see how much health it had as its information all came up with question marks. He was starting to feel the effects of having low energy now, as his breathing got heavier, and he started to sweat. I gotta end this quickly, he thought. Aim for the head. He barked orders at his skeletons. Critical hit 12. Critical hit 12. 48 damage was done in an instant, and cracks were beginning to form in the statue, a telltale sign that it was close to death. The statue's helmet armor crumbled off, and Jay found that it was another female statue. Of course, he didn't have a moment to pause, as he kept smashing it with his hammer, and the group did 42 damage, as one skeleton missed a critical hit. More cracks formed, and it seemed like the statue had no hope now, it was beaten fair and square. Another series of hits landed, causing heavy deep cracks to form on its head and expressionless stone face. Just as Jay was about to do the final hit, the statue dropped to its knees. Forgive me, brother Helvetia. Its bow dispersed into particles of light as a solemn and sad voice came from the statue, and Jay felt his heart stir. Jay breathed in deeply and exhaled, letting his anger cool off. Be free, Jay said in a commanding tone. He felt a mix of emotion as the statue had clearly retained some parts of its mind, and Jay really didn't think of it as an enemy, but a victim. With a final hit, its head was smashed apart. 2300x. Jay panted for a moment, his energy low. Damn, I wanted to destroy it so badly, but I don't feel any satisfaction. A sense of sadness dawned on him, but he was also happy with the large amount of experience he was rewarded with. Jay looked around for a moment. He had things to do. First things first. He pointed to each skeleton, giving each of them an order. Bring me the bones of the destroyed skeleton. Loot the statues. And you, he squinted, bring me my shield. Jay then looked around for a moment, checking the room. There was nothing at the back of the room except the throne with the glowing rock above it. He wanted to reach up and grab it, but remembered what happened in Sedulus's tomb. Jay decided it was probably a trap, so he waited until the skeletons collected all the soul stones before he would try to grab it. Chapter 99. Jay was almost going to sit on the throne, but realized this could also be another trap. There were just too many hidden twists in this pyramid, and the innocuous throne looked eerily dangerous. Even what seemed like a straightforward fight to get to the archer statue turned into a dangerous battle. Thankfully, he remembered he brought some items from his home. He pulled out a chair and a stool to put his legs on as he relaxed for a moment. Ah, this is nice. He smiled as he waited under the warm light coming from above. A chair was a simple thing, but at this moment, simply sitting down and relaxing made him feel incredibly content. Before sitting down, Jay pocketed the soul stone from the archer statue, since it was the close by. Large soul stone, empty. Oh, a large one. I thought one would be here. Jay sat in his chair and gazed at it. It was spindle-shaped and about the size of a short sword. It was now big enough to see that the center was translucent. It even seemed hollow inside. I wonder if that's where the soul goes, he thought, gazing at the less opaque part of the crystal. A part of him wanted to smash it and see what was inside, but he resisted the urge. It was not an easy thing to get, and Jay finally felt like he was making progress on his quest. Sure, he was well into the process of gathering the hundreds of normal soul stones, but those were easy to get compared to the few large and greater ones he needed. The skeletons were periodically coming back. One slowly made a pile of soul stones, another bones, and the other brought back pieces of Jay's shield. Jay decided to open up his level up notification. As he relaxed with a warm smile in his chair, he could pick up that other stuff later. Level 10, skill acquired. Level 10, choose your path. 5 free attribute points. New skill first. Summon ? Helminth. Choose your path before acquiring this skill. I have to choose my path. Sure. Jay opened his next notification with a sense of anticipation building up in him, though he was still quite exhausted from the battle. Choose your path. Bone, blood, spirit. Warning, this cannot be undone. Blood, bone and spirit. Would that mean I become blood necromancer, or a bloodmancer, or a spirit necromancer? What would happen to my minions? Jay looked at his undead loyal servants. This took Jay by surprise, and it was the last thing he expected, a specialization choice. Nevertheless, he entertained the ideas. Jay could only imagine, since he had only ever heard of the normal bone-type necromancers, which was simply called necromancers. With the blood choice, he pictured grotesque hulking masses of flesh, squirting blood and pus everywhere. Large flesh golems that pierced their enemies with protruding bones, and ate them to grow the flesh bigger. Large and slow, vulnerable to fire. He even imagined multiple faces of people that had been absorbed into the back of the flesh golems, speaking to him as one voice. A shiver went up his spine. No, not blood. He quickly shot down the first option, rubbing his neck. Next, he tried to picture a spirit necromancer, imagining wisps, spirits, wraiths, and wailing ethereal ghosts that could drain the life of anything they touched, cursing and terrorizing the lands, leaving only mummified corpses and shriveled plants in their wake, unstoppable when faced with physical weapons. But what if I come across magic-immune enemies? Or if I need protecting? They would probably be weak to magic too. While Jay pondered these things, he could only guess at what would happen. After all, the world has never seen either a blood or a spirit necromancer. There was spirit-type magic, but practitioners were usually executed, as it was quite similar to soul-type magic, which was a threat. Perhaps I would be the first of either type of necromancer. Maybe monsters aren't given the option to choose. He pursed his lips. These choices didn't appeal to him, but being the first had its own sort of appeal. Bone seems to be somewhere in between flesh and spirit. It's either the best of both worlds, or the weakest of both. I suppose, though, that it is its own thing. Jay looked at his skeletons, working frantically to bring him his things. Spirits probably wouldn't be able to do that, and bloody flesh creatures probably wouldn't be that fast. These guys are strong enough at the moment anyway. Compared to other adventurers, I'm leaps and bounds ahead of them. Jay felt like the decision was obvious, but it was a huge choice. He sat silently thinking over everything for the next 30 minutes. And his skeletons had finished gathering by now. Deep down, he knew what the right choice was, he was just stalling. Soon, he shook his head at his own indecision, as he knew what he wanted. Jay knew that if he picked either blood or spirit, he would have a yearning regret in his heart, and as he was about to lock in his choice, he felt a wave of excitement rise in his heart, and he knew this choice was right. Bone. I will choose bone. It's obvious. He smiled. Jay opened his notifications and selected bone. Choice accepted. Class, evolved, pure necromancer. Class item acquired. Class quest acquired. Class passive acquired. Pure. I like the sound of that. Jay smiled with a nod. Okay, so that's skill. He checked it quickly. Summon Bone Helminth. Imbue bones with necrotic energy, raising a cunning creature to fight for you. Requires at least 2 spines and 1 skull. Bone Helminth level 1, 0/1 summoned. 20 mana plus 1 per level of creature. The summon skill doesn't have a level. I guess I can't level it up. Jay then analyzed the Bone Helminth level 1, part of the skill for extra details. Bone Helminth level 1, HP 10/10, MP 10/10. Skills. Sentinel, form dash. The Helminth coils around its master, becoming an untargetable piece of their armor. Periodically lashes out at attackers and fires spectral bolts at foes. When its master is attacked, the Helminth loses health instead, down to 1 HP. Natural form dash. Allows HP and MP regeneration, plus 200% HP and MP regeneration. The Helminth detaches from its master and acts as an individual construct. Spectral bolt. Its jaw unhinges and slowly winds open before quickly snapping shut, a bolt of necrotic energy firing out through its closing jaws. 5 magic damage, necrotic. Can only hold 5 bolts. New bolt produced every 300 seconds. 1 mana. Symbiotic, passive. Starts at level 1. Levels up with its creator. Egg. If creator is level 30, the Helminth will be level 21. Grave visitor, passive. Can travel freely and silently through the soil and ground. Can covertly collect a nest of bones underground. Max of 2, bones carried at current level. Ensnare. Can ensnare enemies and root them to the ground, making them unable to move. 3-second snare. 1 minute cooldown. 5 mana. Awesome. I suppose it would have either been Spirit or Blood Helminth if I went with the others, which is why it made me pick a path. Jay wanted to jump up from his chair and summon it, but he decided to check out the item he got, and the passive he got from picking the Pure Necromancer class, not to mention the class quest. Okay, so passive skill first. He tried to remain calm. but his eyes betrayed him. He felt like he found a treasure chest specifically designed for him here in the dungeon. He opened the notification and suddenly his ring tightened around his finger. Ah shit, he tried to take it off, but he couldn't. It felt like a wasp was stinging him over and over again. Come on, what the hell? He was getting frustrated as he waited, trying to pull his necrotic ring off. Chapter 100. Jay's necrotic ring seemed to be draining blood from his finger. Finally it stopped, and a red band appeared around the ring. Now it was like a piece of him had become a part of it. He took the ring off after the process was complete and found a black band now around his finger too. It appeared to be like a tattoo. Jay sighed looking at his ring, and he got a notification. Necrotic sense acquired. Necrotic sense, level 1. You are able to sense in which direction and how far away your constructs are. You are able to give more detailed commands over longer distances. Oh, good. That was worth the pain, I guess. Jay shrugged with a smile. It was a great passive to get. He knew it was not too useful now, but later on when he had more skeletons, this ability would be invaluable. Not to mention, he also kind of liked the look of the red band on the black ring too. With a stretch, Jay got up and stashed his stool and chair away in his inventory. Time to summon this thing. He prepared to test out his new summon bone helmet skill. Jay shifted his ring, causing a flying curtain of bones to orbit around him like usual, enchanted. Come forwards, Helminth. He raised a brow, confused as nothing had happened. Did I miss something? Jay had to reread the skill. Oh, it needs spines, right? I wonder if this is why it stored them in my inventory instead of the ring. I guess they weren't a weapon ingredient of some sort after all. Jay had collected 11 spines from the silt wolves, so he took 2 out from his inventory. Glad I collected extra soap rat skeletons too. Okay, here we go. He smiled. Jay held out his hand over the spines while his bones levitated around him. Come forwards, Helminth, he chanted again, thinking he sounded cool. Green gas left his hand and the creature wasn't constructed as he thought it would be. Jay assumed that each spine would simply be connected from end to end. But instead, every single vertebrae was pulled out and disconnected. It floated for a moment before being rearranged from the largest to the smallest. A soap rat skull was pulled from the floating wall of bones and attached to the top of the spine. The core body of the creature was formed, but it kept floating as more was constructed. Next, some smaller finger and rib bones were also pulled from the ring, attaching to each side of the 4-meter spine. Interesting. After that was complete, it stopped floating and dropped harmlessly to the ground. Suddenly the creature twitched, then began to move. Jay had used 2 different creatures to form the undead creature, so he got another notification. Chimera research 10%. The creature had dark green eyes that didn't glow, and each of them were like a solid ball of glass. Quite different to the skeletons, which had gaseous non-physical eyes that slightly illuminated their wolf skulls. The spine of the snake-like creature was blue with white ribs that ran along each side of its body. The head was a soap rat skull that was now modified and warped. The necrotic gases warped and stretched it longer, making its jaw much skinnier. It more closely resembled the skull of a small crocodile. Interesting, I guess it prefers a smaller skull. After seeing how long and slender the skull was now, Jay doubted that it would even want to use a wolf skull. The silt wolves had much wider and bigger heads, compared to the soap rats. The Helminth coiled its body and raised its head up, staring at Jay. It seemed like a dancing cobra as it gazed at him with its dark green eyes. Jay only gazed back, wondering what it was going to do. It seemed like it wasn't waiting for orders, but was analyzing its master. It was like it was trying to work out Jay's intentions. Suddenly, it dived underground. Jay was confused why it did this, but he could sense it now that he had the necrotic sense passive skill. He looked in its direction as it seemed to swim through the earth. It was heading towards the bone pile that was being gathered from one of Jay's skeletons. Jay decided to wait and see what would happen rather than to stop it. Suddenly, a bone was pulled underground. It happened quickly and quietly. Jay wouldn't have noticed unless he was looking directly at it. Not even a sound was made. Next, he sensed that the snake-like creature was coming back to him. It was right under his feet when suddenly its pointy skull poked out of the ground. In between its jaws was a bone. The creature looked at Jay, seemingly with anticipation as it held the bone. Oh, this is for me. Jay reached down and grabbed it. Thank you. He raised a brow. The serpent then squirmed for a moment, and another bone appeared in its mouth. It had regurgitated a second bone. Oh, Jay hesitated for a moment, but after closer inspection, the bone didn't have any goo or bile on it, so he grabbed it with a smile too. Thank you. The helmet snapped its jaws a few times, which made a noise, and dived back underground. It repeated the process of bringing nearby bones to its master, but Jay decided to just walk over to the bone pile and resummon his perennial skeleton. The bone worm could only carry 2 bones at a time, so this would have taken too much time otherwise. It was clear that the powerful glowing golden arrow had dealt massive damage to the components of its skeleton, as the skeleton seemed quite skinny after being summoned again. So Jay gave it access to his soaked rat bone stockpile, which it proceeded to munch down on. The bone worm periodically stuck its head out of the ground as it analyzed its master once more. Jay was glad that he had a little bone gathering machine now, but he realized that he would not want it bringing him human bones in the middle of the night while he was trying to sleep, so he gave it its first orders. Helminth, come here. After a moment, the spindly creature poked its head out of the ground. The rest of its body followed, and it curled up, waiting for its master's orders. I have some rules for you. Never bring me human bones, and never show yourself to anyone, Jay said with a nod. The helminth chomped its jaw in the air twice, and then dove back underground. Strange little thing, Jay thought with a warm smile. Now, what was next? Oh yeah, the item. How did I get an item anyway? It must have to do with the pure Necromancer path too, as I got the notification after choosing it. Surely an item cannot just appear out of nowhere, but soon enough, Jay got his answer. Thank you guys for listening. This was my Necromancer class. Next chapter's coming soon. P.S. Numerous editing of text are made to make it cleaner for listening. This may delay uploads, but I'll do my best to work on it faster when I come home from work. I also like to listening to it, so it helps laughing face. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.